What's up, Soren? Yes, indeed, the update did finish. Oh, I better put Discord away for now. Yes, it did. And somehow... And yet, where is Flight Simulator? Uh-oh. Let's figure it out. Where are you? There we go. Well, that's interesting, and that's not what I want. So we're going to get rid of that. ℙ𝕙𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚, brother. Window capture. See, it says Flight Simulator EXE, but this isn't Flight Simulator EXE. This is myscreen.exe. Why are you being so weird, Flight Sim? There we go. That's another setting. Let's use that setting. Is that Tasshin?
Hey.
Hey, man. All right, let me get you on screen in a moment. I gotta put the flight sim where it needs to be, which is behind my face instead of in front of my face. Good. Oh man, I see the problem here. Hold on 1 second. We're gonna eyeball it. How's it going, Tasshin?
It's going great. How about yourself?
I'm good. I made some tea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, absolutely feel free to get some beverage of your choice, etc., if you so desire. I hear a beverage.
Yeah, I got some water here.
Cool.
Beverage of choice.
It's a fundamental option. It's good energy. Okay, good. Now that is there. Now I must simply put you in here. And the way I'll do that is... There we go. There's Tasshin. Excellent. Hello, 𝕽𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚. Welcome. All right. I'm pleased for once with the setup. I always... When I do this, there's always some little thing I'm screwing around with, always some little option. I think I'm happy with this.
Do you have a pre-flight checklist?
I really should.
You should.
I should. Oh, wait, I've messed it up again. I was happy for just a second, and then I messed it up again. This is a very meditation kind of related experience. Oh, no.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, there we go. There we put it back. All right, sweet. This will do. What was I going to ask you? I don't remember. All right. Well, let's get rolling. Might as well, as people start filing in. Did you have a chance, Tasshin, to think about where you would want to fly in the world?
I did. We have to double check that it'll be a reasonable time, but I was thinking Taipei to Japan.
That can't be that long. Let's take a look. Taipei. Maybe Chiang Kai-shek International. Does that sound like the right?
Sounds great.
Sounds like good.
Maybe we could look at the options in Japan, because I actually have an idea in mind.
Yeah. So yeah, where are you thinking in Japan?
I was thinking Okayama. I don't know if there's an airport near there, but it should be on the western side of Japan.
Lithros, our resident airport finder, is in the chat. And Okayama? How do you spell it? OKI?
It's OKAYAMA.
I see two of them. RJOB.
All right.
Cool. And actually, it's actually kind of perfect. With the Cessna, it's 3 hours, but we do get to pick a plane. And also, by the way, occasionally we crash. Occasionally we decide we want to teleport somewhere else in the world. So it's our oyster. As far as I have to give you the plane spiel. What's up, oyster? Welcome. The plane spiel is as follows. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the left. There are fighter jets, fast, go high, very easy to control. There are big Airbus, Boeing 747 type jets, and there are many little propeller planes which are slow, hard to use, cool looking, nostalgic, but not extremely effective. And then there are jets, which are more like not quite as fast and extreme as the big ones or as the fighter jet, but like they're pretty operable. That's kind of the breakdown as I understand it in simple enough terms.
Can you scroll back just a little bit?
Yeah, and we do have delay here, so I might have to just scroll back a lot.
Okay.
If you see a word, I can go to a word.
JMB aircraft. That looks pretty cool.
All right. It's a little small and slow, but let's do it. Let's at least start with it.
Let's start with it.
Okay, so you'll see this in a second. The range it gives us is very low.
Okay. 9 hours. Pretty slow.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe we should pick a faster one then.
I guess to make it all the way in one plane, yeah, we should switch. But we also can. Well, how about this? Let's take off in this just to see if I can, and then we'll change. Then we'll pick something from here. All right, let's do it. Oh yeah, and this is, I remember what I was going to ask you. How's the audio? Oh, audience. I guess, I don't know, Tasshin, maybe you should say something. Usually they can hear me, but...
Hey, happy to be here, friends.
Sounds good all around. Generally, if Tasshin's too quiet, let me know, just because that seems to be a recurring thing. But, all right, well, if it's good, it's good. I'm willing to accept good news. Hello, Tin Duck. Thank you for the comment that the audio's fine. So as this loads up, yeah, how's your evening go? What's on your mind?
Well, it's going well. I feel very happy to be here, and I can feel that in the body. A lot of excitement and alertness, and it's pleasant sensations. Yeah.
How'd you spend your day, if I can ask? Kind of curious.
Sure. Well, I've got a really nice morning routine that I've worked out.
Yeah.
So I start with a little bit of movement, and then do standing meditation for like 20 minutes, and then seated meditation, and then I do some morning pages, writing, and then I make a breakfast. And then, yeah, after that I was working on different things, and I had a podcast episode that I did with Aaron Stryker, who's a friend of mine that runs a nonprofit, 𝕽𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚, that we were talking about what he's up to there.
Right.
And yeah, that was my day.
I am actually pretty interested in the routine stuff, because routine is something that I'm enjoying my routine right now, and it seems clear to me that all right, by the way, I can also show you around the game a little bit, because it's cool. This is us,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we look good, ready to rock.
Good.
Yeah. You can see the inside of the plane in exquisite detail. And so we've got all these different, so first of all, beautiful leather seats, it looks like. So like these little planes are beautiful. And you can press these buttons, backup battery, landing. Oh yeah, I guess I just turned off landing lights, but a bunch of cool stuff.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I can screw with the flaps, but usually I start screwing with stuff, and then it reduces my ability to actually get up off the ground. So let's start with that. We'll get up there. There we go. Flaps are good for takeoff. Thank you, Lithros. Chiang Kai-shek International. Let me get a little more speed. For some reason it's not really seem like it's tracking my speed. Let's try to get off the ground. No, we're not going fast enough. What's up with that? 𝕬𝕚𝕚𝕚, do I have my brakes on or something? Are the gods displeased? Oh yeah, I had the brakes on. Yeah, there we go. Let's get a little speed. Let's just get a little speed. That'll do it. Hey. Now let's see.
Nice work, Kersey.
Thank you. Oh yeah, our wheels go back in. Beautiful. One at a time, it looks like.
Wow, that is so cool.
It is cool, right? And they try
I'm like a little boy right now.
Yeah. All right. You can look around a little bit, you know. And you know, as much or as little as you want. Like a lot of these landscapes are quite cool.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do stuff like screw with the weather and time of day to get kind of different visuals. But I'm just going to try to get altitude. 𝕬𝕚𝕚 says, look at him resist pulling up. I swell with pride. Yeah, dude. So there's a lot of mental control that I've learned. Oh yeah, wait, the flaps. I always forget the flaps. So let's put the flaps. I'll just show you the flaps because you seem to be enjoying this. You can see on the back edge of the wing, we got these flaps. And I can put them down, which is, I think, not what we want to do right this second. So put them not down. But now we're going down. Tips always welcome, 𝕬𝕚𝕚 Kiyosaku. Slow altitude. Yeah, no, we're slowly going up. Are we going to go fly over the Senkaku Islands? I don't know. What are the Senkaku Islands? Are they in our path? I'm good. Cool. All right. As soon as I get us going roughly north, then the tiny ones that are contested. Oh, I see. I've not been following that. But now that you say it.
Are we taking off in the evening or the morning?
This seems like it is the morning. So, yeah, I put it to... It's 6:20 a.m. in game time.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought that was, you know, it's metaphorically good. Beginning.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, this is pretty chill. We're at a pretty low altitude, though. All right, so should we switch planes?
Probably should.
Or we could go, maybe when we make it to the sea. We'll switch when we make it to the sea. We can go for a little bit of this one. All right, cool. You should see them if you follow the plan in the distant southeast. Interesting. You're talking about your routine. Oh yeah, this is the thought that I had about this, that I am really liking my routine right now, and I have realized that COVID is part of why I have such a good routine. And I have these thoughts about, like, okay, I really like a lot of things about this, and what am I going to do when I'm around people again? Because there's a degree of, like, is that going to throw me off, and why do I let that throw me off? And that's one thing that I have on my mind that I don't feel like I have total control over. Like, what's going to happen when I collide with more people and, like, all the social changes and stuff like that. So I'm really happy with my habits, but some part, there's this anxiety about it being, like, conditional or something. I don't know what thoughts you have on that.
Well, I'm curious to hear just sort of a compare notes angle first of what
Totally.
your routine is, what you like about it.
Well, there's a couple things I don't like about it. So, my sleep schedule is ridiculous. I go to sleep very late and I wake up very late, and I don't love that. Earlier during COVID, I had a completely diametrically different schedule where I was getting up at like 7 or 8 for a few months. It's just, that's been all over the place. My eating is good though. I've been tracking my calories and I've been steadily losing weight, which is something I was going for, so I'm happy about that. I have been praying 30 minutes a day for about 37 days. And so that I'm quite happy about, just to consistency.
Amazing.
So I feel good about those. And then beyond that, there's sort of like a intangible of like what does it take for me to get in the zone to do good work, and I feel like I can find my way there, and titrate the different elements, going outside, getting sun, getting fresh air, like when I'm in a bad state, finding a way out of it, knowing when I have to let myself get hit with the bad state and just tumble with that for a while. A lot of those kind of intangibles, I feel pretty good about how I'm handling them. So yeah, those are some of the things.
Huh. And so the fear sort of is that when people are a variable again, that you might lose the momentum.
Yeah, lose structural integrity.
Hmm. I'm trying to think, like, I noticed that I don't have that fear or concern, and I'm trying to wonder why.
I mean, in some sense, I think having the issue is maybe like the more aberrant condition, which is to say that there's no particular reason why you should have the issue. I think
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean,
yeah.
People really are a variable, so yeah. I'm not sure I'm convinced that it is the aberrant thing. Yeah.
Because it's common.
Yeah. I mean, people have a huge impact on how you live and what you do, and maybe it's just I really don't know where I'm going in my life, or like where I'll be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 months from now, or what the world will be like. And so I just know that with the habits that I have, like, I want to keep doing them. They're things that I would want to do in almost any circumstance. And so maybe that's it, just knowing, having such clear evidence to myself that I want to do these habits and that they're important to me and that I'll keep doing them.
You know what it is? Okay, that's helpful to hear, because part of it is that during quarantine and everything, I had to struggle against myself to establish the things. And then I felt like I succeeded, but under these limited conditions. And then you're like, okay, the conditions are going to change.
Right.
And how resilient is the answer that I got to?
Right.
I feel pretty good about it, but it is kind of on my mind.
Yeah, I think the whole theme of figuring out how you want to spend your time, like, there may be different variables that matter for different people, or are different challenges for different people, but like, that's how you spend one day is the microcosm of how you spend your life. And so if you live a thoughtful life, then you're thinking about that sort of thing and reflecting on it pretty much constantly. So I don't know. I don't think that there's like a final answer to these questions.
Yeah, I guess I would love to hear. So I guess I didn't really do a true introduction. I kind of assumed at least some of the people in the that we have with us will have seen you on Twitter to some degree, and I'd be curious also to hear a bit about your podcast, what you're doing with that, just sort of like an overall, like, I guess I should have started with this. Who are you, Tasshin? Tell us about yourself. What are you into? What do you like?
Good question. Yeah. Who am I? I don't know. Well, I think a lot of people will know me from the Monastic Academy. I was training there for the last 5 years in 2 different stints, and just recently left. So I've been involved with meditation for about 10 years and monastic training for the last 5 or so. And it's been a big part of my life. I think another big aspect of my life has been intellectual inquiry and reading books and trying to get to the bottom of questions that I'm interested in answering. And sometimes it seemed like books are the way to answer those questions, or writing, my own writing, and then sometimes it seems like spiritual investigation and technologies are the way to answer the questions that are alive for me. So I think I've been a little bit of a dilettante and a flâneur, and not especially the best at any of the things that I'm interested in, but sort of a jack of all trades, and I like it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's there's this. I think about that too, and I tend to frame it in a way that feels, kind of, it's a little bit self-serving in a way that I feel good about, which is like a little bit like the generalism, specialism. Like I'm like generalism good, I'm good. But
Totally.
yeah, I do resonate with that though, like having a finger in every pie. And yeah. So I guess, so as far as it's interesting. So I also know you we ran into each other because of the monastic academy, and I got to hear some of your thoughts, back then, briefly here and there about what spiritual practices are and why they might matter, how to relate to the world in general. I believe you talked about like environmentalism as a thing you care about. Yeah, I don't know if you seem like you had a reaction on it. You can grab it if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do care. I think I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the planet and the different problems that we face, and global warming and species extinction is definitely one big aspect of that. I'm also really, I think one aspect of it that's probably the most concerning to me, that something that I've been thinking more about recently, is like speciesism and the human view that humans are better than other peoples on this planet, animals and plants and the ecosystems. And I see this as like very pervasive. It's everywhere and sort of implicit in so much of our cultural structures. And I see it as basically an injustice and part of the reason that we have the problems that we face. So it's almost like it feels a bit like, I don't know, maybe someone would disagree with me or complain about this, and I would be open to hearing that. But the metaphor that comes to mind right now is like I'm in the deep South, in the thick of like the worst periods of racism in this country, and like people just take it as a status quo, as a given, and no one thinks that it's a problem or something. So whereas, so I think speciesism is an incredibly evil problem, and I would like to solve that. It's something that concerns me. So global warming and other forms of extreme, large, complex, human-caused suffering relate to that, and I'm concerned about all of those things. And yeah, environmentalism is definitely an aspect of that.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I guess it's we're sort of as we started gathering our ideas and like putting them on the table. That kind of big picture stuff is useful to hear. And so, right. So then it's interesting to hear you talk about that again. And sort of says, every instance of people worrying about speciesism I've come across is because they see it as an extension of racism. I didn't see Tasshin as saying that it's an extension, more of a metaphor. It's interesting.
I'd be curious to hear more from 𝕬𝕝𝕚 as well. He said he considered it to be offensive.
And while we're doing this, by the way, we're sort of making connections across a landscapes of low information, low context. So we'll kind of, I tweeted the other day that that Twitter is kind of like alien first contact all over the place all the time.
Yeah.
And like, the vibe you get in sci-fi that it's like, okay, you get these signals and you don't know what they mean. Is it threatening? And if you do the wrong thing, you piss somebody off. But
were you offended by what I said, Kersey?
no, it's kind of hard to offend me. I was not. No, I've heard people. I know people with way more offensive ways of saying way worse views than you described. That doesn't bother me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Animals would always and ever prefer themselves over us if they had the wherewithal. That's how nature works. Oh, so okay, so there is a question in that, which is kind of like, is red in tooth and claw? What do you think about evolution? I guess there is the question of like wild animal suffering, and because I know we both met a bunch of people from the EA world who think that that nature itself is like a horrible place, right? I imagine you'll run into that perspective, but if not, I can kind of review what that is as I've heard it. I guess how do you think of the kind of like omni-peaceful approach versus the fact of things like evolution, or what do you do, or how do you relate to that?
Well, just to take it from a different angle, I noticed that my body is having kind of a fear response.
Yeah.
I'm generally terrified of angering people, and so I noticed that there are people that are offended, and so my body is like terrified right now, and it's a little bit hard to think cognitively in that state. And there's mental confusion as well. So just want to honor my body and where I'm at right now. Yeah.
I mean, please take your time with it. Also, at the end of the day, I'm king here, so, and you're my guest, so I just want to hang out, and the people we have in chat are generally here every week and are pretty chill, so put that out there.
Okay. Well, it's helpful to hear from that, and also, yeah, I think. Well, if there is anyone that's like straight out offended, I would be happy to talk to anyone about this later. A random image in the text chat. Oh, I have no idea what that is.
Oh, it's a good one. Here, I'll put it up on screen. Where's my W has a contribution. He would devour you if he could. Do not forget this.
That's funny. I think probably both the position that I have and the positions that multiple people are maintaining in the chats are probably a bit more subtle than I can comprehend at this time. But the perceptual feeling of how to put this. It's a metaphor for what it's like for me to experience the world with plants and animals in mind, and it's not. It basically brings up a lot of compassion for the extreme amounts of suffering that humans are causing others in ways that seem excessive and unnecessary. So I'm not saying like, I don't know, that like animals don't kill or something. It's not like naive or, I don't know. It's a little bit hard to make sense of the oppositions that I'm seeing. So maybe it's quite different positions. Like you said about aliens meeting each other. Yeah, I'm a little bit of an alien here.
Well, and it's also, I mean, this is the internet, right? We're communicating through a keyhole. Like, part of it is also like, this is fascinating, by the way. I love that we're like getting real this quick in the thing. We're just like off the bat, we're like getting really real. But it's always wild because it's like, I feel like Twitter in particular and I mention Twitter all the time because generally I think a lot of my people came here, maybe all from Twitter, where it's like you're always constantly running into people, and especially the more followers you get, and having these interactions with no context, right? And it's weird for me because I feel like I know these guys, and I probably know that they're kind of needling you, but they're kind of in a good mood about it, and kind of being a little bit, tiny bit rude, but also kind of for fun, but also, maybe it's a little spicy too. So, anyway, what do we got here? Holy, hey, what's up, Holy? Saw a frog eat another smaller type of frog when I was a kid and never forgot about it. Yeah, man. I've got a couple weird stories like that about how I learn to relate to animals. Speciesism against bacteria and viruses and plants. Luther says, the issue for me isn't animals killing, but animals not capable of taking a moral position that doesn't prioritize themselves.
Well, the one thing that I can respond to is Lithros said, so your compassion extends to plant suffering. Yes, it definitely does. In fact, a lot of what I'm responding to on an experiential level is actually most connected to plants. I don't know. It's and trees. Yeah, especially concerned for the trees.
And also, by the way, Tasshin, one thing we can do is if the object level's an explosion, the meta is also interesting too. So if it's like things like what's it like to live in a world where you have compassion for trees, you know what I mean?
Yeah, to be clear, I think I'm imagining that you're misreading me slightly. Like when I named that I'm having a fear response, it's not like, oh fuck no, we can't talk about this. It's like, how many conversations that are like this can you have where like you can acknowledge your bodily and subjective and phenomenological experience? And so I wanted to like put that in as a dimension of this conversation where it's like, oh, my ability to respond is somewhat constrained by my emotional experience right now, and to name that and acknowledge it. But it's not like in fact, part of the reason I mentioned it and dived right into it is like, this is actively something that I'm wrestling with about how to communicate about it, because there is such a divide between the default human view and human views that there are, and the felt experience that I have on a daily basis walking in nature. And there's such a gap there that like I feel an obligation to bridge the divide, and it's not obvious to me how to do that. So this is an opportunity to clarify my own thinking and make it feasible to communicate that to others without offending them or calling out people individually. There's no use to that. It's not, I'm not trying to like accuse us of anything, but it's like there's a problem and we should see that there's a problem.
This is great. So damn, now I'm all getting all direct in my experience now too. So I think for me, so you noticed you were like that I had kind of misinterpreted a little bit, like I think I was a little bit too worried about you and stuff, in part because my role as host, I gotta like make this work, right? And then you were right, and then I appreciated that you noted that, because it kind of helped me be like, oh right, this guy's done 1 billion hours of meditation or whatever. He's gone through worse experiential states. It's like we're just kind of we're cool. Nobody's about to die.
This is like a 3.
Yeah,
like a 3. We're doing great.
Right, and then but all that said, the
this is a vibe. Wow.
W currently flying straight in the ocean, 100 million full hour tin can with a half tank of gas. Hell yeah, dude. We're making it. No, we're flying straight. We're good. The thing I was going to say is I'm not a vegetarian. Let's put it like that. And I do have some views on it, and I'm also willing to be an object of investigation here as an example interlocutor, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you want to go there,
Word.
because yeah. Also, we did
Well, I
say
tell you what, Kersey,
yeah,
we hit the sea. I feel like we should switch planes,
yes,
and then we will have wisdom about how to resume this contentious conversation once we've switched planes.
beautiful, beautiful. Let's take a look. Aircraft selector. So let's say, yeah, we got the Cessnas, the Airbuses, Boeing. I do think there was a new livery they just released for one of these. Amelia Earhart speedrun. Um, how big of a plane? What do you think? Fighter jet, or big plane?
I chose the first one, man. I'm going to leave it to you to choose the second one.
All right, cool. We can do that. Let's try the Boeing. Why not? It's big and fast, and it says Emerald Livery, which I think might be new. Livery, I have learned, is a plain word for what it looks like. Oh, that's beautiful. I like that. It's kind of weird. It's cool. Green. Emerald Harbor Air. And it's humongous. All right, beautiful. And I will continue along our flight path. This is pretty ocean heavy, but we're going to Japan. And also, we'll go pretty fast in this thing, so we actually might get more Japan than expected. So,
Cool.
I'm cool with it. It's pronounced like the Oregon livery. Oh, livery. Every day's a school day. And Lithros, you better believe I'm gonna max out these engines. I get a lot of hate, Tasshin, for how I fly, which is I fly like I'm 10 years old and I just want the fastest and I want to go up, etc. And all right, yeah, let's look in this cockpit here. Are there lights or something I can turn on? There we go. In here, I have no idea how you're gonna direct me to the light button. Like Love Livery, it's the same for a Knight's King drip. You fly like a suicidal child kept alive by a doting god. Lithros, please tweet that or something so that I can have that phrase on hand. I love it. I love it. Well, we got a lot of buttons in here. That's one thing I can tell you.
Lots of buttons.
Hell yeah. A whole lot of buttons. You know, nice cabin. Even more buttons in here. Wow. And it does look like we're passing a couple little islands, so that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I'm with this WTMMP person.
Yeah, W says, I get the feelings you're expressing on this stuff and personally find it extremely difficult to really explore suffering. There are aspects of it you almost cannot talk about, literally cannot talk about. They're conversation enders.
And maybe that's a helpful point to start with rather than my maybe poor metaphor. Just what my direct felt experience of this sort of thing is. It's a little bit like, so I used to be a pretty hardcore atheist, and in particular, one of the like conceptual ideas that I picked up with that at the time was thinking that energy was bullshit and chi was bullshit. And I remember having like allergic reactions to people talking about it. And then at a certain point in meditation practice, I was just like, there is chi, there is energy. I can feel it in my body right now.
Yeah.
This is inarguable to me, at least.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to not see the world in terms of chi when I can feel it in my body constantly now, you know?
Right.
So like, it's a little bit like with chi, it's a little bit like, you know, those like kind of juvenile philosophies. It's like, well, maybe Kersey's not a real person that doesn't really have a consciousness. Like, I have no patience for that kind of philosophy.
Mm.
I want to treat you like a consciousness that is engaging with me as opposed to like a robot or something, you know?
Mm.
Maybe there are people that have more patience for that kind of thought experiment, but I'm not such a person. So like I take certain aspects of my experience and I'm like, this is, if not a fact, like something I have to contend with. So I had that sort of shift with chi, and then there are other shifts that have happened in the last couple of years, really the last year even, that are similar shifts, except it's harder to talk about them.
Mm.
But I guess so. I'm trying to wrestle with how to articulate this, but I started to experience trees and plants and animals and other humans as well quite differently, where I'm getting like reads of what their experience is like just from being around them. And you know, so if I see a plant or a tree or an animal, it's like I can tune into a sense in which I'm experiencing what it's like to be them. And so before that, the view that was implicit, or the way that I experienced the world, was seeing plants and trees or animals as like shapes or colors or material or resources. And now I experience plants and trees and animals and other people as living beings, right? So I already was treating humans as living beings, and that comes with a whole like affordance of how to treat a person,
Mm.
right? Like there's whole assumptions that I'm making about you as a person that would probably even be hard for me to like find, because they're so built into the conversational structure of speaking to someone and being in the world. And I realized that because trees and plants and animals are also beings, that they deserve and merit the same kinds of affordances, to the extent that it makes sense. You know, but basically they're living beings and they are worthy of respect and care, and they deserve to be happy in the same way that I believe you as an agent or the people in the chat deserve to be happy. And I want to act in ways that are kind and ethical towards all beings that are actually alive. And human society in large and in small ways is not predicated on those same assumptions. We treat humans with respect, but we don't treat plants and animals and the environment with respect. And things like global warming are enormous manifestations of that, but they're also tiny instances of this. And you know, the tiny ones are actually the easiest ones to connect to. When I see plants or animals on the individual level being mistreated, it just, you know, just thinking about it right now, it's breaking my heart. And it's like there's a perceptual flaw in the way that people interact with the environment, where they're not treating things that are alive as if they're alive. And that causes behaviors that I see as intrinsically evil, both in the small scale and the large scale. And it's not because we're trying to be evil, but it's a natural consequence of a perceptual flaw.
It's interesting to connect the evil with a perceptual flaw. That's an interesting connection to make.
Well, the behavior that results from the perceptual flaw I see as evil.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I had a friend who, yeah, how to even push that back? It's in my own language, it's like you're not capable of acting well towards something. You are, if you understand something, you may be able to act poorly towards it or well towards it, but you definitely can't act well towards it, at least on the dimensions on which you're interacting with it, if you don't understand it on those dimensions, or have some very conservative approach. But that's limited. Being conservative is limited. I don't know if that makes any sense. As I described it, it's sort of like by opting out of something, you can be sure to not harm it, except for in the sense that you lost the opportunity to be good to it, to help it, to work well with it. So there's that side where conservatism doesn't get you out of the need to understand. Is kind of how I've thought about some of these things.
That's interesting. Did what I say make sense to you, Kersey? Was it like coherent at least?
Yeah. Yes. I kept thinking of this scene from The Legend with Jet Li. Maybe it's The Legend 2. And, it's probably just because it's where I first ran into some kind of trope. And I am kind of categorizing you a little bit with the sort of, context I have from getting like Asian memes, basically, about some of these compassion and stuff. But the scene is kind of funny, but also there's something kind of quite cool about it, where he's a monk. He's like a kind of like Shaolin style monk, something like that, and he's in a jumping contest for some reason. He's gonna try to jump farther than everybody else, and it's consequential for some way. He's got to help somebody. There's some reason, and he runs. They show the antagonist run and does this enormous leap and whatever, and then Jet Li runs, and as he's running, he gets to where he's gonna jump, and there's a bug there. And he stops, right? And so he just immediately stops, and he leans down to the bug and picks it up and, kind of reckons with it, sets it aside, and then leaps even farther, having lost all his running momentum. He then leaps even farther than the other guy. And it's it's just this scene is like burned in my brain because of when I was 11 or something when I saw it. But that's what I kept thinking of, and I hope it's fine to make that's the connection.
Yeah.
It's a mindset. I don't know. 𝕬𝕚 talking about his perception along similar experiential type perceptions is that the suffering of humans is way, way higher than plants, etc. Though it's hard to compare things like death. And Lithros is going in with the ethics thought experiment. Is a human who would kill and eat you if given the chance as deserving of compassion and protection as a human who loves and cares for you. Feel free to grab any of these if you want to or not.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more interested in what 𝕬𝕚 is saying. It's a little bit hard for me to engage charitably with thought experiments. I can reason out intellectually why they're useful, but it's hard to connect to them emotionally, especially when this is coming from such a direct experience type thing. It seems like I connect to that more with 𝕬𝕚, both because it sounds like 𝕬𝕚 has similar experiences, but also it's engaging on the same level that I'm having of like suffering's not acceptable, and then it's a specific is it really more suffering? And I'm not sure. I haven't thought too much about it. I think there's something of like something in general. This is almost sort of rationalist. I think I don't identify as a rationalist, but about the metrics of the suffering and how much humans are able to perceive it. And humans are. It's tricky to do the research on this, but like humans are causing species to go extinct at an ever increasing rate, and we've had like basically genocide of species since humans have been around, and that's increasing constantly. So even if individual animals or plants have less suffering than humans, which I think is already contentious, I'm not sure that I would agree with that, but even if I did cede that, I think the scale is like, from like a utilitarian perspective, is, it at least merits looking at. I don't really know about how measurable it is, but it's not insignificant. So there's that. And then, and then 𝕬𝕚𝕚 is saying about convicted criminals. So I'll try to chew on this. Let me see. Let's see. Yeah, I think it seems like 𝕬𝕚𝕚 is trying to meet me where I am, and I'm willing to engage, but I'm not sure I fully understand what he's actually saying. So I'm not sure I can respond. Does this make sense to you, Kersey?
Yeah, let me. I'm going to try to take a crack at framing how I'm taking 𝕬𝕚𝕚's thing to you, and see if that is useful.
Great.
How would I ask this question? Here's how I would frame it. I have no idea if this is going to get to 𝕬𝕚𝕚's thing or not. But you're describing a compassion type intuition. And I feel like, okay, so here's one of my reactions to it. And I have many. One of them is that I like hearing what you're saying. But it's kind of like an emotional topic. And one of the reactions I have, and I don't know whether it comes from like a good place or bad place, is like it's convenient to care about plants, which is sort of a fucked up thing to say, because I imagine because we're just also interacting about how it's not really convenient and it's confusing to interact with people, but there's something like a feeling that like I don't know, the world's full of hate and horrible things and all this cruelty and all this suffering and misery, and then the like simplicity of the compassion instinct that I'm seeing, and I mean simplicity in just a descriptive way, rather than not as a negative thing, possibly as a positive thing. The simplicity of it is hard to reconcile with like this other instinct, which is like, okay, but what about shitty people? Do you really care about shitty people? That part of it. Does that kind of...
Well, it's helpful, I think, maybe not for the reason that you're trying to put forward, but like it reminds me that, and I'm gonna try to say this in the best possible way for friend 𝕬𝕚𝕚, who I appreciate you're trying to. If I'm missing you, my apologies. But like what I'm about to say comes from my own experience. So if I'm projecting it onto you, it's just because I have been in this place and I'm describing myself. But when we encounter experiences that are extremely uncomfortable in the body and emotionally, especially if they have a moral content to them, like I have been behaving in a way that is not acceptable, or there is evil present, or I don't know, like if you notice you're addicted to something or something, right? It's extremely uncomfortable. And there is so much momentum behind human behavior, both individually and collectively, in this realm, that it feels impossibly overwhelming, right? It's like, if this were true, if the argument that I'm making is true, if we just put it on charitably, then what the hell do we do about that, right? What is there to be done, right? And that's what I'm sitting with. It's like, I can say this articulately, maybe it's not coherent, but I can at least say it. And if I really accept this, which I do, it's like, what do I even do about that, right? The most I can do is talk to people that will listen to me about it, which is what I'm doing right now. But I have no idea what we should do other than acknowledge it. So in any case, when we recognize these aspects of our experience that are uncomfortable, often the easiest thing to do is basically to jump from the body, where we feel this and we know this in a somatic way, to the head, right? And any thought content that comes up is a way to avoid feeling that pain, right? So it's much easier to go into the head and say like whatever it is that comes up in verbal content than it is to actually sit with the discomfort and the reckoning in the body, right? And for me, with this, I'm not willing to do that. So I'm just sitting here extremely uncomfortable thinking about this in the body, and I don't want to look away from that, right? But it's easier to look away by going up and thinking about it, right?
Then I have a question for you then. What do you think of the practical side of, like, I've done a lot of introspection, and I think it's possible to gain like spaciousness, right? To be able to tolerate the experience of looking at things. I think that is possible. Also very hard. Also takes years, right? What do you think about, just sort of from a practical side of, let's say I was just like, yep, I'm with you about the plants. Like, let's say I was just there. Then what about a kind of, what do you say to the person who says, okay, that's true, but I can't just feel that all the time. I need to like live my life, and I need to decide. I do need to decide from a place of thought or some conscious framework, because that at least is manipulable. It's like I don't have to have my heart rate and my anxiety up while reasoning about what to do and how to live. So does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. I think my only response can be another question, which is, in general, a lot of the things that I'm interested in the interactions and dynamics between individual scale things and collective scale things. And so this seems like an instance of that question where it's like, say there's a shift on an individual level, which is basically what I'm reporting. I'm saying I experience this differently on an individual level. What do on a collective level, right? It's not obvious. So I have a lot of compassion for someone like that, because it's not obvious. Even if you stay with the shift on an individual level, the whole of society is built up and structured to not live in accord with whatever that shift is. And so I don't really know is the answer.
Right.
I just feel for such a person. It's not obvious. And frankly, it feels like, again, this is sort of the experiential level of it, but like society is structured to brainwash you against staying with these kinds of truths. So the whole thing is set up to help you forget things like this and draw you away from them. So I don't really know what to do. I think there's a really, what I'm trying to embody and demonstrate right now for myself is like, just like, I get an image of like planting my feet in the ground and being like, I don't know, but I'm not willing to look away. Right. I'm not willing to look away. I'm not willing to fall asleep.
Okay, then what do you think of the following archetype? So I'm imagining a character, maybe in fiction, but I think such people exist in real life, who it's sort of like, I imagine this like older male badass, and it's like wartime or something like that. And terrible things are happening, and people are suffering, people are losing limbs, it's just hell. And I have this image of the person, of somebody's like reckoning, interacting with the suffer. I mean, usually the way this plays out in fiction is someone's freaking out, and then that guy says, "Get your shit together," cracks him in the face and like puts him back on the, to opening the gate or whatever task he has to do, something like that. I don't imagine that guy. How do you think that guy relates to suffering? Does that make sense? And the reason I'm asking about that guy is because I like that guy seems practical and active and not overwhelmed. And that's the question.
The thing that comes to mind hearing you say that is often. So the specific subject matter that we're talking about, the scale of it is so vast, right? It basically involves human civilization and the whole planet, right? So there's experientially a tremendous amount of grieving to do there, of like almost like emotional debt, right? And it's enormous. So, but on a smaller scale, there are much smaller versions of this. Yeah, earlier I was talking briefly about like addiction, right?
Right.
Say you have a moment of clarity and you realize I've been addicted to, say, alcohol or something, right? And you're like, this is not acceptable. I can't keep living like this, right? That's an enormous moment for someone in their life where there's a similar thing, but on the individual scale, right? It's just one person that has this addiction problem, as opposed to I'm claiming all of society has this problem, right?
Yeah.
But we know experientially that you can make it through that, right? Even that tremendous challenge of, say, an alcohol addiction or something like that, people get through that, you know? It's extremely hard. It's not easy, but people can and do get through it regularly, right? And there's a wisdom that comes from having that kind of an experience and getting through it, right? So that's what basically an elder is. An elder is someone who's been through that kind of thing once, twice, 10 times, many times, probably not just themselves, but also guiding others through it, right? And seeing, hey, I know this is really hard for you right now. I know your heart is breaking. I know you don't know what to do. I know you're confused, but we're going to get through this. It's possible to get through this. I've done it. Other people have done it. You're going to get through this. That's what being an elder is. And I don't know that that kind of a figure is possible or merited on the collective scale, because we haven't been through this kind of a challenge before, right? Or this whole set of challenges. The shape of these things we haven't been through. And I don't know that there is some wise elder that's going to say, hey, you're going to make it through this, because we very well might not. Like, I don't want to be like apocalyptic or something, but there's no guarantees that we're going to get through, say, global warming or the existence of nuclear weapons on this planet, or, you know, any of the other similarly shaped problems. So, but on an individual level, it's definitely possible. And, you know, I haven't gone through that extreme of a challenge myself of, say, like breaking an alcohol addiction, but on a minor level, you know, I've been through some shit in my meditation practice and my life, and I've seen, you know, you can make it through this, and you come out stronger and wiser and more capable, and there's a confidence that comes with that, and it's part of why I'm like planting my feet in the ground right now. It's like, well, I fucked if I know how to deal with these kinds of problems, but I'm not going to look away from it. I'm not going to look away. Yeah.
Oyster had an interesting question. Why do you think observing animal and plant suffering is more uncomfortable or painful for you than others? And I'm going to add to that question something a little bit like, can we hear a little bit of like Tasshin's origin story?
Mm-hmm. Sure. What connects it to you, to my origin story?
I'm thinking teleologically. I'm thinking, you know, I'm thinking about, here we are in time, and you're trying to develop towards something and some set of ideals and somewhere. And so what's the cause a little bit? Obviously there's no simple thing here, but if there's maybe something that gives a sense of like, you know, not everyone, like I don't have, like, I'm on my own path, right? And I don't have your specific one, like the specific thing that you're describing. I see you as describing a kind of, a type of spiritual awakening, and I don't know what is the structure of like the space of spiritual awakenings. I think there might be different ones, or maybe it's all one thing or something like that, but it's like, what I'm trying to say is I find myself interested in the specific character of like your angle on all of that, because I do see myself as on a path broadly similar, but I would describe it with quite different terms. And mine's not specifically, well, I'd have to think about this, but I think I at least would not open with relating it to the suffering of all beings, for example. Who knows why? Who knows what causes that? So there's just sort of curiosity there.
Right. Okay. Well, let me respond to our friend first, and then I'll respond to you. So
Totally.
The I don't know. I don't know if I would agree that I feel for plants or animals more than others or humans or something. I think it feels a bit qualitatively different insofar as when I feel into grieving for plants or animals or the planet, there's like an added layer of, again, the sort of momentum of how much inertia there is in this direction of causing this kind of suffering. And it's like so overdue to look at it. But I don't know that it's like intrinsically that I feel it more or something like that. And it's hard. It's similar to what we were talking about before, of like hard to compare human versus plant versus animal suffering. It's like, I think maybe this is simplistic. I'm like, nuanced reasoning is not my skills strongest suit, but like, to me, it's like suffering is suffering. And if there's suffering, it's not acceptable. And it might be here, it might be there, it might be for this person, it might be for that person, it might be for this species, it might be for that species. Sure, it's more in some cases than others, but it's all suffering. And if it can be resolved, it should be resolved. And that's just a pretty vanilla Buddhist perspective. I've been steeped in Buddhism for years now, so it makes sense. But I think, and maybe this feeds into the origin story of like, I've been reading about these kinds of things for years now, but in the last year or so, there have been dramatic consciousness shifts of like a felt experience of this sort of thing where it's real. So and to be clear, I'm not claiming to be awakened. You can find lots of people left and right that are claiming to be awakened. I'm not awakened, but I think the experiential side of that was like, I was in solitary retreat last year for over 100 days, did multiple solitary retreats, and
I will want to hear about that, by the way. That is very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it changed my life, so it was one of the most significant things I've done. And it was in a cabin in the woods in rural Vermont at the monastic academy, and I was outside in the woods every single day, and I was doing intensive contemplative practice all day long, and my mind got extremely quiet, and certain shifts happened. And from that perspective, I mean, as I said earlier, at the beginning of that time, it was like trees were shapes or material or objects, and then they became friends, essentially. They became beings that were worthy of respect and consideration, and in many cases they're suffering, and that became a direct experiential reality that wasn't acceptable to me. So it's like it's not really that different from so many experiences that we have constantly of like, I don't know, say you see a homeless person on the street that's asking for money because they're suffering. It's like all of the feelings that you feel there are the same sort of thing that I feel when I see plants and animals and walk in the forests and consider the kinds of suffering that we're invoking on this planet. It's the same category, just directed at a different species, essentially.
There we go. I was losing control a little bit here. Hagen had a. Hold on. Let me think really quick about what you said. It's interesting. It's like, because in my head, I don't normally think of. I don't have you categorized as like environmentalism guy, but we happened coincidentally to start out on that, and then it's sort of like branch we took to get here. But it is pretty interesting framing for this whole thing. I can ask, suppose advanced science permits the elimination at a biological level from a perception of suffering. Perhaps you can't stop the things that previously would have caused suffering, say, but you could remove the ability of a human or animal to feel that. Is that an acceptable solution from a Buddhist perspective, or what would that look like in a Buddhist framework?
there's a move that I'm imagine if I like point to it, you would be able to do it, and probably Eigen would be able to do it as well. But I'm imagining, I'm trying to engage charitably here. So I'm imagining that thought experiments point to something that is a real question for someone and that they're really asking. And so the thought experiment is a way to get at that question, maybe freed from certain limitations or assumptions. But I'm actually much more interested in the real question that's being asked under the thought experiment. And so I imagine, assuming that that's a fair frame, I'm trying to grope for what the question under the thought experiment is, which is maybe like, I'm just guessing here, and this might be already uncharitable to Eigen, but like something like how do we resolve suffering? Something like that. Yeah, that's fair. Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe what comes up is like suffering has multiple stages. It's nuanced and complex, and I don't fully understand it myself, but there's like really gross forms of suffering and really subtle forms of suffering, and and I doubt that you could resolve all of them in a mechanical way. But some of them you can and should resolve on kind of an object level. So, and a lot of what we're talking about is basically object level forms of suffering. So,
I kind of liked Holly's question. I'm interested in this solitary retreat and the life of trees. Did you feel similarly towards rocks and dirt and the walls of the hut as you did towards the trees?
I think at the time, no, but over time it's sort of expanded, and it seems rude not to engage with all things in the same way that I'm talking about now. So I try to, this is just going to take me even deeper into this contentious field, but I try to engage with objects in the same mode of consideration that I'm talking about with plants and animals. That it's not like a stupid, this isn't like a stupid, naive position. Like I don't know. It's not like I expect this like watch that I'm holding to like suddenly give me a PhD dissertation or something like that. It's not stupid or naive expecting that everything in the environment is human or something like that. It's like there's an attitude of respect and consideration that I think anything that's a being merits, and I think that my intuition says objects deserve that same kind of merit and respect that I'm affording humans and plants and animals. Yeah.
I have a couple of reactions. One is that it's always hard to talk about a lot of this stuff because when you start using language to describe an orientation towards the world, you end up having to make weird statements, and the statements, and it's just in the nature of language that the statements are ambiguous and seem like other statements, and those other statements seem like other belief states and other orientations, and it's like you make a single sentence and then this like fractal explosion of other interpretations and other seeming like recommendations and framings and social maneuvers and all of that stuff just explodes out of it. So the as far as thought experiments go, there are contexts in which I am not a big fan of thought experiments either. And welcome, Af Mason. Thanks for coming by. And So my own version of this is something. Let me think if I can come up with an example. It's like if I came to somebody and said, somebody I was close to, let's say, and they were wasting all their money. Let's say they were just spending money and it was just clearly going in a bad way, and I was going to try to have that conversation. And I said, "You're wasting all your money." And they said something like, "Well, what do you think? People should just throw away all their possessions?" Or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so what happened here? So I tried to say, here's what I think you're doing, and here's what I think is happening. Here's the consequence. And I got hit with there's a way in which just even parsing that is odd. It's like, so are you saying that general principle? And it's like, I can tell that we're clearly not talking about them and their money anymore directly, verbally. We ended up in this other realm of different types of stuff, and it could be worth having that conversation, but a lot of times it's just not. So like when I work with people, and sometimes I do work, some people here will know this, that I work with people in a one-on-one context they're working out through their shit. And it's sort of, I am always on the lookout for a dodge, basically. And people do habitually use conceptual frameworks and like intellectualism, often very high quality intellectualism for many types of tasks or whatever, to kind of dodge. So that's sort of how I assumed you were reacting to the thought experiment thing. But we also have a follow-up from Eigen. "Hey, sorry about that. I was under a baby. I definitely wasn't trying to ask a hostile question. We just started talking about reducing or ending suffering, which I understand to be sort of the basic aim of Buddhism. And I just started drifting towards external solutions to the problem and how those would be viewed, maybe as a way of getting better resolution on what the problem is, perhaps."
Yeah, to be clear, I didn't read you as hostile. It's just I've said this a couple of times, but it's difficult for me to engage charitably with thought experiments. Mostly as a character flaw on my part, not like yeah. Anyway, I think it. So. Yeah, maybe it sounds like the meat of the question is about reducing suffering. So I'd actually be curious to sort of take from ground zero, like steer from a totally different direction and say like, why is that a way of viewing the world, and then what do we do about it? I think that there's some sort of emergent thoughts about this that are like bubbling up that I would be curious to explore. Does that sound interesting to you?
Yeah. We also had some. We can do calls, by the way. Oh wait, we did have a comment in call-ins. Oh shit, it's 𝔽𝕝𝕚. Why don't we take a quick call?
Okay.
Let's do it. Fuck it. And then we'll sort of shake up our rhythm a little bit. So, 𝔽𝕝𝕚, I hope you're ready. Yo, dog.
Yo, dog.
Welcome back. You are on Philosophers on Twitch playing Flight Simulator with myself and Tasshin.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hello, Kersey. Hello, Tasshin. Yeah, so Tasshin, to give a quick bit of context. Well, okay, no. I'll start with I'm calling because I felt like in your description of your experience of like coming to feel lots of things and then feeling lots of suffering, and like that humanity, maybe not going in a direction to necessarily handle that, and maybe suppressing it, or like ideas that that's happening, etc. I felt that there was some, I don't know, plea on your part of like, what do I do? What do we do? Etc.
Yes.
And I feel as though I do conceptually have some answers. Now, I don't know that I'm really going to be able to convey them in this format. I think that, if we were talking in person or like one-on-one, etc., I could do a much better job. But I guess just hearing that plea in my mind, I feel very compelled to try to say at least something.
You're not misreading me, so
Okay, cool. And then I guess a quick bit of background about myself. So I are you familiar with Paradigm Academy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was working there for a while. That's how I know Kersey. I have done a pretty intense, I'd say, maybe very intense, personal journey that I think relates to a bunch of the meditation stuff, but as far as I can tell, is very, 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 very different. So I took an extremely different path. And so, like, I mean, you mentioned the phenomenon of, like, feeling things and feeling like you could feel the experience of things and stuff like that. I do think I have a lot of familiarity with stuff in that space. But I've taken some journey that I think is pretty different. And then I personally am interested in the monastic academy, Renshin personally. And now that I am, somewhere different than I was 5 years ago or whatever, I'm like interested in just meditation and places in general that have gone on journeys and sort of trying to compare experiences, etc. So that's part of my background here for interaction. If that makes sense. I'll try to answer the thing, and then that might not really work, and then we can end. Or
what's the question you're taking a crack at?
Well,
like, what do we do?
What do?
Yeah, or like, I mean, if you don't mind, I could say maybe my conceptual interpretation of part of what the question was. Is that all right?
Yeah, keeping an eye on the time. I am curious, but yeah.
That was more a question for Tasshin, actually. But yes, also.
Motherfucker. All right. Yeah. Please. Yes.
I'm mostly interested in your answer. I don't know what you would suggest about doing if talking more about framing it helps. Then sure, but
no, it's fine. I'll skip right to the answer. So I think I'd say, how do you feel about love? How do you feel about love, man?
Good. I try to cultivate love for all beings. So feel good about it.
Do you feel like, with how you understand love currently, that it could go to a depth that would be able to affect a thing like humanity's feelings about and interpretation of what's going on with animals and plants and etc.?
I think that's kind of the wisdom behind, earlier I had this image that I shared of like planting my feet in the ground and saying I'm not willing to look away from this, and I experienced that as love. So I think that's what I'm at least trying to do. I might maybe you have a different sense of it, but that's how I experience myself, of like trying to love.
I think in your description, my interpretation was that, like the fear or uncertainty would imply something like, well, maybe the plan of love or something like that wouldn't be able to go far enough, like as you currently conceive it. Does that sound right?
I think so. It's interesting, just to like throw a conceptual hand grenade in the field. There's
great.
From the Buddhist angle, there's the 4 Brahma Viharas that are, there's metta, which is like wanting others to be happy. There's karuna, which is compassion, which is noticing suffering of others and wishing that would be resolved. There's mudita, which is experiencing joy for others when they experience it. And then there's upekkha, which is equanimity. And I think like a broader question here for me that's active and alive is, Oh, I don't know. If I had sort of like a Buddhist character sheet or something like that, like my metta would be pretty high, and then my mudita would be like mid, and upekkha would be kind of okay, and then the compassion, the karuna, would be like the worst of the four, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and so I experience compassion as quite uncomfortable, and that's sort of like part of it, right?
Hmm.
It is uncomfortable, and then it's whether you're okay with that and have equanimity with it and can act on it in skillful ways or something. But um, I don't like when I honestly look at my own self. Um, the compassion is weak for me, and in terms of like my ability to skillfully feel it. So I'd say like it's coming from love, but it's extremely uncomfortable. So
Hmm.
how, like, the question is how to uh, feel and act from compassion, which is itself, I think discomfort comes with the territory, and then like how to increase the tolerance level essentially for the discomfort, because as I say, in this territory there's so much grieving to be done. The discomfort
Hmm.
level is like maximum, right?
Yeah.
uh, so did any of that make any sense?
Yes. I wish I was a little bit more familiar with the particular concepts that you mentioned. Um, but I'd say generally speaking, yeah. My
I
thought
mean,
is that
compassion's just
I'll,
noticing suffering and like saying this is not acceptable, right? Like again, I used the metaphor earlier of like seeing a homeless person in the street, like the feelings that you feel when you're like, man, this person doesn't have enough to eat, or it doesn't have a place to sleep, and it's really cold out. Like that's uncomfortable, right? Uh, it's that feeling. Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, my thought is I'll try to say some things that I think about that, and then I'll box it to that for Kersey's sanity and whether we're keeping an interesting topic or whatever.
I do
Okay.
find it interesting, by the way. I've got some problems with compassion myself. I'd love to talk about that at some point. I appreciate
Yeah.
it being put it back on my map, but yeah,
Word.
yeah.
I'm at least for my own interest, I'm totally down for you to jump in at any point
No,
with
I'm
this.
listening. Yeah, yeah.
Cool, cool. Um, yeah. So, okay, with what you said, compassion, hurt, noticing that. Yeah. So, how do you feel? Okay. I don't. I think I so loosely expect to fail here, but um, yeah. I mean, how do you feel about like accepting the current position of that suffering? So, like, yeah. I mean, with like a homeless person or whatever, it's like, you know, on the one hand, you could say like that's unacceptable or bad or something. Um, though on a different note, like you could say, um, well, like yes, there are many things about that that we wouldn't like, or that that person might not like, or etc. Um, but that is, pretty rather solidly like a current part of like the fabric of our world, like as it exists. Like that position is true, and to move to other points, better or worse, beyond that position, there needs to be probably like a bunch of acceptance of what that current thing is.
Are you saying that accepting the status quo is the first step to changing it?
Um, well, it depends on what you're thinking of as the status quo. I guess, yeah, I interpret status quo as like a somewhat socially construed concept that wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
actually necessarily take into account what the actual position of things is.
Hmm.
But yes, I mean, I think broadly it's a yeah, like, right, accepting the status quo. So I think that okay, so I'd say for me, like a lot of the work that I've done is like okay, well, if I'm like uncomfortable with the state of this homeless person or whatever that I see, like the first thing I need to do, and this is like an uncomfortably long step, I think, and requires like a lot of time, is something like make enough room in myself for the way that things are currently to be received as such. So
Well, so Tasshin will have heard many versions of "accept how it is" before.
That's true. Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Uh, and I mean, this is thematically a tricky question. And yeah, I think actually both in a meditation context and in this sort of like action in the world context, that have like limited patience for things like that, of like accept it how it is.
mm, mm.
Um, it's like
Uh,
not very good meditation advice and not very good activism is how I see it. I don't know. It's my hot take, but yeah.
okay, well, my version. Hmm.
I mean, on the one hand, I mean, you seem to be saying something, but like to the extent that it's true, it seems banal and then and like not helpful. And I don't mean to be rude or anything, but
No,
it's
no,
like,
no, no,
yeah,
no.
there are homeless
Uh,
people. I get it.
yeah, I was going to preface before any of this that what I said might come off as banal,
Hmm. Hmm.
or
Hmm.
and that I apologize for that. It's not that it's not that I don't think you would have, heard of the concept of acceptance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I think I have a different thing, and I'm hoping that some of that could be conveyed, more through my tone or whatever than my words. But yeah, low bandwidth interaction. Um,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there's
um,
more there. I must be just missing it or something like that.
yeah, I can try to take, one more crack at it. Okay, well, you mentioned being not liking the just accepted thing. Yeah. Sorry, give me a second to collect myself, and then maybe crazy if you want to jump in or something.
Yeah, and you can also I don't know if you can hop off and get back on later with another version, or I also I'm not doxing anybody, but I do know that you guys are kind of know each other directly in real life, and there may be context for
Hmm.
more positive
Yeah, I mean, I
engagements.
maybe I'll just extend to like, there's a lot of interest, like, Andre, I'm appreciating what you're sharing. And then there's also a lot of people that seem to be engaged in the chat. I'm just like blanket invitation to talk about anything that anyone's interested in, by DM or email or whatever later.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
This is important stuff. And, I'm not, maybe for the peanut gallery, as it were, like, I think the intellectual caliber of the things that I'm saying is like rough at best, and I'm not very satisfied with it, but it's extremely important to me. And so it's like worth venturing out of my intellectual comfort zone to try to articulate these things as clearly as I can. But I really would be happy to talk about any of this with anyone. And certainly, I so appreciate, Andre, the willingness to try to share something about what to do
Thank
about
you.
it. Like
Thank
that's
you. Thank
important
you.
from this perspective. So really want to hear anything like that as well, because it's important. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Um, yeah, so I'll take one more short crack at it, and then I'll probably jump off, and then maybe I'll come back on earlier, or maybe offline or something like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, so right, I don't see acceptance as a one step away position from wherever you are with respect to a given thing. So in terms of like a meditation practice of like, just accept it or just look at it or whatever, like I think I would agree that that's a shit. It's like a sort of a shit direction. What I'm thinking of is like, right, like maybe there are like, 1,000 ways in which the homeless situation makes you uncomfortable, and then sort of like iteratively calling up a mixture of like whatever is most relevant for you, but also I guess a mixture of like what level of problem you might be able to handle at the moment. and then being like, uh, I guess trying to step through each of those components individually.
Mm,
Does
mm-hmm.
that does that make
Yeah,
any
that makes
sense?
sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, I've found that while that requires, probably a lot of meta framework around what you're doing, to be able to iteratively get through a lot of stuff like that, yeah, that you, okay. I mean, I've brought myself to, I guess, accept things in that way, not like accept like, okay, it's this way and it's going to be this way forever, but just like, okay, this is how it is now, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe shit or fuck or like, oh, actually, this is good in some ways that I didn't realize.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've moved myself to positions like that on things that I wouldn't have previously thought were possible.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess, yeah, talking like that about that kind of thing, I think it's going to get way more complex, and then it would make more sense to do offline if we wanted to do that. But yeah. And
I
then
get the sense of it. It's helpful.
Cool. Great. That's more than I could have hoped for, maybe. So, very glad.
All right, Wandry. We've made it to Japan, so I'm kicking you off. See you later.
Japan ahoy!
Right.
I'm going willingly.
All right, bye.
So long, friend.
Take care.
There we go.
Flying here, Kersey.
What's that?
We're still in the air, so nice flying.
Yes, I almost lost control just for a second. Hold on. Good.
I'd be curious, Kersey, just to zoom out a little bit. Like,
yes.
What in your world? Like, where are we, dialogically?
What does dialogically mean?
What's your current narrative about what's happening right now?
Well, what's my current narrative about what's happening right now, like in the context of the show and stuff?
Yeah.
This is kind of a wacky episode, and I'm not against it, but it is that. That's one. And right now what I'm balancing is, do I want to like make sure we hit certain topics, or do I really need to go with the flow more? That's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm like, kind of, and yeah, I'm just scanning the chat. We've got some mild heckling, nothing too serious. Yeah, where am I at? I think I'm like, also another thing going on in the back of my mind is this topic I've been thinking about, is that somehow I feel like everyone I know who I want to get to know each other kind of knows each other, but isn't like really working together, and that bothers me. So that's the thing, kind of, where I'm thinking about community stuff a lot lately, and so if I can ramble about that for a second, it's
go for it.
Like, you retweeted me earlier, where I said that I felt like I was sensing like something good happening, and and it's like, basically, community is this word, right? But it's like, this show has been one way I've tried to get people together, tried to share some ideas, all this content stuff, all this Twitter stuff, all this bullshit, doing all these things. And then you kind of hit a point where people start, like, there's just been a couple instances recently where like a little bit of magic happened, and it like wasn't directly caused by me. And that was the bit mixed, of course, because firstly, I want to cause all the magic because I'm greedy to be a cause of magic. Secondly, it's good though, because I stress about, I'm never going to be able to, like, it's like, why won't people like follow me and go with me? But like, I'm just going to directly shout out that like Lithros has been grabbing the wheel on this Shakespeare thing some of us have been doing, and just organizing people, coming up with like reading the fucking play the night before, giving people roles. We're just like reading Shakespeare together, and it's just a great time. And it's just an example of like one of like, I've seen like 7 things lately where it's just like something happened. It's like, oh shit, I didn't do that, and it's good, and it like is something that I want. And
Mhm.
part of the context here is I kind of have my internet friends and like my real life friends, and I just feel like I see this like um, stuff in space. It's just like asteroid dust and just like swirling like, and it's like never quite like clicking to be like the thing I want it to. People going in and out of these different organizations, for example, and also having Wandre call in because I do know Wandre from real life, and so that's just a context here where I'm like, there's so much left to do is how I feel. And
Mhm.
even when I hear you describing like the distinctions between the different concepts of compassion and compassion related things, um, I'm like, fuck, like I want to understand that. I want to get the whole framework here. I want to do a meditation retreat, with whatever group I should, and I want to
Mhm.
do all this stuff. And it's just like, I feel like I see the world as all these brilliant people who are like kind of talking to each other. And there's always that
Mhm.
element of kind of. And so that's sort of like, I'm seeing the void. I'm seeing the like space between the people, and it's like right in my sights. And I do feel like I can do things about it, but it's just a totally overwhelming thing. So,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
so
Mm.
that's I don't even know what that came out of, but you kind of asked where I was at. So,
No, yeah, you answered it perfectly. It's helpful to sort of get get a read of where you are. So, yeah,
yeah, and also we made it to Japan, which is cool. Get a little,
yeah. Whew,
yeah.
thank goodness.
I did speed us up a little bit there. So, yeah. So yeah, that, and I don't know what we've got plenty of time left, and I guess why don't I ask you, like, what's something that would you'd like to get out of the remaining time we have, or um, there's like stuff we like can do because we like answering questions or whatever, but like what would be cool for you? Like you can ask me stuff, you can ask the audience stuff, and we also had that big list of topics, which was awesome, that you
Hmm.
DM'd me that I'm gonna glance at.
Hmm.
Um,
I wanna trust where you want to go, Kersey.
yeah.
I think um, I'm good to go anywhere. Yeah.
Well, then why don't we did have a question about this in chat. So about here, can you help me with my loving kindness practice?
Hmm. Someone said that.
It was someone asked a related question, which was where is it? It was
Oh,
related.
I see it. Is this the Chevron 42 person?
Well, maybe
Maybe not.
it was about meta though. It was yeah. Yeah, Chevron asks, oh, I'm curious about meta. If you try meta meditation and the instruction to conjure up a feeling of love feels like something you can't even begin to treat as deliberate action, how can one explore from there? That basically is my question.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay. Um, well, so it's so interesting. I mean, I am so bullish on loving kindness meditation. It's something I do a lot, and it's something I talk a lot about. And um, on the one hand, I think it's a better default for most people than a lot of the techniques that people are handed when they start getting interested in meditation. Um, and on the other hand, it can be extremely challenging. It can be extremely challenging for a variety of different reasons. But if people have a trauma background or an abuse background or their life is just crap,
hmm,
uh, like all of those things can make it quite hard. Um, I also have a bit of a beef with how it's typically taught. Um, it's very formulaic and stodgy, sort of.
mm-hmm,
So I try to teach it differently because for me, I experience it as very playful and flexible and joyful in a way that doing it formulaically is not it. So I
yeah,
mention that because there's a traditional ordering of how it's presented, but the basic idea there is you from easy to hard. And the question here is like, what do I do if even the easy things are hard, right?
yeah,
It's an open question for me what to do then, but I have a little bit of um, some uh, I mean I would be curious to talk to Chevron about this, but like I think that with some tweaks, there are some things that can be easy for almost anyone. I mean, the classic examples are like using like a pet or a really cute animal or a baby,
Hmm.
where you bring something like that to mind, where it's just like so totally simple and not complicated. I don't know. I posted some cute puppy pictures and kitty pictures and pandas the other day. It's like I think most people, if they see that, they're going to think, "Oh, that's a really adorable little puppy." Um, so I would recommend something like that to try. But if that's hard, you could do gratitude. I mean, that gratitude is also quite hard, but that we're alive, presumably you ate today. You know, I'm imagining that if you have access to a computer, probably there are like some structural affordances in your life, like a roof over your head or a place to sleep. Maybe not, but there's something to be grateful for, and maybe you can
Access
tune
to a
into
Twitch
that.
channel. Yeah.
Access to a Twitch channel,
Hmm.
people to talk to that care about you, and like I care about what Chevron is saying and their experience. So um, I don't know. It is hard, but I think that with some effort and consideration, there's something available for most people, and it might require just like trial and error. But puppies, kitties, pandas, gratitude, those are some ideas.
There's something that I like about the answer being that simple. It's like, stuff you love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting.
It's a little annoying to hear without actually talking to someone, because you want to hear what their experience is and what it's actually like for them and why it is hard for them, and that is typically unique to specific people. But regardless of what someone say, probably I would say puppies or babies or pandas or
Hmm.
little elephants or something, or gratitude for having a roof over your head or food to eat or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally associate my objection, if I check my own objection, is
Hmm.
um, that it will be painful. Is
Hmm.
my objection, um, which I know is in some sense no object if part of the protocol is to hang out with
Hmm.
that. Um,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if something like that comes up, it's good to be with it. And then, ideally, I was complaining earlier about how just be with it or accept it is like kind of crap advice. I mean, ideally, you'd have something more robust psychologically to, uh, address something um, but yeah, failing that, you just, like crying if you feel like crying because you're sad of all
yeah,
the ways that you haven't been loved or something like that.
yeah. I there's this bit in I'm gonna say spoilers for X-Men Days of Futures Past. So I like to respect people's spoiler preferences. If you don't want to hear it, shut your ears for the next 60 seconds. If you're cool with the spoiler, or if, I don't know if you've seen it, Tasshin.
I think I did see it a long time ago. So yeah, in any case, go for it.
Um, the it's the this part that stuck with me is there's all this time travel stuff. Xavier has lost his powers early in the movie. Young Xavier, he's lost his powers. You learn later it's because he's been taking these pills that help him walk again, and they happen to deaden his psychic sensitivity. And this is obviously consequential because the world, predictably comes up against the possibility of being destroyed in like a really fucked up way because time travel. So um, there's evil robots, and this moment where he ends up crucial moment where he ends up talking to his future self, right? And so you get Picard or whatever his real life name is, and coming in, and he's like, um, you think that you're afraid of their pain because Xavier's like can sense everybody's thoughts, right? And so old Xavier says to young Xavier, you think you're protecting yourself from their pain, but you're protecting yourself from your own. Um, and that totally stuck with me, and I think I have some thing there personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it would not surprise me at all if, like a robust diet of metta brought up grief and sorrow and suffering of different kinds. Um, I think, oh, that's actually nice. I don't know. There's this person I love on Twitter. One of my people on Twitter is Nat Sharp.
hmm.
Do you know Nat?
I've seen that. I almost said that account,
Hmm.
but yeah, I've seen that around a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nat's really inspiring to me personally. I love Nat, and uh, he said he does all these like challenges and talks about them, and is just trying to put himself out there and push his comfort zone and
Hmm.
do different things. And he said in passing, there's this challenge he was doing. He's like, I'm a simple man. I see a challenge, I accept it. And so I was like, that makes me want to challenge you.
Hmm.
And I told him, okay, here's the challenge: do 30 minutes of loving kindness practice for 30 days in a row. Which, if
It's a lot.
anybody here is interested in doing metta, that's a great way to dive in. And he's like has a thread right now about his challenge with that, and you can see what it's like for him. I mean, um, it hasn't been easy. Different challenges have come up of like it's hard to bring up love, and he has some resistance to it and challenge. And then he's on like day 8 or 9 right now, and you can see him like making real shifts in
Hmm.
how he's perceiving himself just from like a week of metta practice. And like it's powerful stuff. So it makes sense that there'd be like bumpy roads ahead of like obstacles and suffering and discomfort, but it's a lovely road to go down, even if there are like potholes and stuff. Like uh the world becomes oh, delightful. Yeah. So, and you can see that, you can get that sense from his sort of firsthand experience of like he's brand new to it and just diving in, and it's a lovely thread. So
Cool. Yeah, we can. Maybe if you send that over, I can throw that in the YouTube video or something like that.
sure.
Um, Chevron had a follow up about a basic intro guide for um, the loving kindness meditation, or do you stick something as simple as conjure sensation of loving kindness for 30, or try for 30 minutes? That's it. That's the practice.
Yeah, I've got a blog post about loving kindness practice, and then
Sweet.
there's a few guided meditations at the end of that. Some of them are by me, and some of them are by other people. I think, in my own experience with loving kindness, like different teachers talk about it really differently, and it's helpful to like try a bunch of different like guided meditations because people talk about it so differently, and probably different things will resonate for different people. So, um, you know, yeah,
Drop as
but that
many
could be a good
links.
place to start.
Drop as many links as you want in the Discord, especially in the philosophy in quotes channel. That's what it's here
Okay,
for.
great,
So,
great.
um, yeah,
I'm loving the view.
yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Switch this to the fighter jet just because for maneuverability, easier to move this thing around than monster, that monster Boeing. What is I guess a question I'd be curious for is something like what's on your mind in terms of like what's next or what are you trying to grow towards right now?
Hmm. Let's see. Um, well, it's a little bit of a expansive period of branching out and diverging and trying different things. I think I'm basically trying to do as many different things as I can and learn as many as I can, be of benefit in as many ways as I can. I think overarching, like what I see right now is from the Buddhist perspective, one of the numbered lists is the 3 trainings, and there's like 3 aspects of cultivation of the spiritual path, and one is ethics or virtue, one is concentration or samadhi, and then one is insight or liberation. And I basically am conceiving of my life right now a period of cultivating virtue and ethics and character. There are certain character aspects that I'd like to grow in and cultivate, and certainly apply the strengths that I already have to be of benefit to others. So that's kind of how I conceive of my life right now, of like wanting to grow personally, develop my character, be of benefit to others, and cultivate skills that will help me to do all of that. I'm still continuing to do various contemplative practices. You know, I sit every day, I do standing meditation. I'm trying to learn about Qigong and Tai Chi, and other things like that. But basically trying to work on the path of virtue and character cultivation right now.
What is standing meditation?
Oh man, I'm very bullish on this as well. So I started exploring this over the last couple of years, and it's interesting because, yeah, I guess we're going with all the numbered lists tonight, but the Buddhists love their numbered lists.
I love it too. Yeah.
So another one is the four postures. So there's like four postures that the body can be in, which is sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. And typically when people encounter meditation, those sort of hierarchically presented in a certain order, where it's like, oh, sitting meditation is the most important one. Maybe you'll do some walking meditation, and then lying down, standing, like, I don't know, right? Most people are exposed to sitting meditation and, you know, to some extent walking meditation. But I think that order is basically backwards, and I would introduce people to standing and lying down first, and then walking, and then seated meditation. I think seated meditation is probably the most advanced and challenging form, and that people should start with lying down and standing meditation. The reason I got interested in standing meditation was I got interested a while ago in Qigong and Tai Chi, and I learned that historically, you know, nowadays, COVID aside, you can walk into like a Tai Chi class for $15 and be learning the form or something like that, you know, in any major city.
Right.
But traditionally, they wouldn't teach you Qigong or Tai Chi until you could do standing for, like, say, an hour in a certain posture in a still way. So that was considered to be the prerequisite for the Tai Chi or the Qigong or any of the internal martial arts. And so I was like, oh, if that's the prerequisite, I should start there. And when I've done it every day for, like, I don't know, 250 days at this point. And it's like rocket fuel for practice. I experience it as basically like passive energy work, where you just show up every day and get in the posture, and then your body starts doing incredible things over time, where the energy starts to flow in really good ways. You relax, you have increased body awareness, and all of that just happens if you show up. It's not like you really have to put forth a tremendous amount of effort. It is a bit uncomfortable. A lot of pain can come up and discomfort, but you kind of build up slowly over time and learn to manage it. And mostly it's been a delightful experience for me. So I'm really trying to get the word out there that it's a great form of meditation. So
I've somewhat unvirtuously ran into some of the biggest benefits I've got from body type meditation, and it happened to be standing when I was doing it, after being really hungover and waking up and feeling so horrible that the idea of doing anything but engaging with my experience was like impossible. I was like, all I want to do is just deal with what's happening. And like 25 minutes, like having insights I'd never had before and changes I'd never had before. This is in a context of having been doing a lot of this stuff. But a weird hack. It's just like, there's something about like the being hungover where it's just like the whole body's fucked up in ways you just usually aren't. That kind of gave me like a data readout that I didn't usually have. Slightly more wholesomely, after doing heavy weightlifting and my legs being really sore, your whole legs will feel like kind of pain in that soreness way. And that also felt like it gave me like a weird, like interesting new data stream for embodiment practices. I know you saw my video on body stuff. I am also kind of selfishly curious for your takes on that. If you had one to share.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I liked it. I liked it. I've been connecting it to stuff that I've already done. And I think that it's something I want to try more of. So, and then nothing nuanced other than consider me a fan.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, Volga asked, what does it look like? Is it the thing with holding the beach ball?
Yes, it is the thing with holding a beach ball. I mean, yeah, I mean, I can just show the thing.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can get this worked out so that, I don't know. Let's see how this will do. Yeah, so you just kind of stand, and then it's like this. That's the one that the person is referring to, the holding the beach ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also have your hands at your sides, or like a lower form of that higher stance that's with your hands out like this. And yeah, you basically just show up in one of those postures and hold it for, say, 5 minutes. And then over time, you build up more time. And good things happen if you do that basically every day.
What do you make of the hand part? Why is it not just standing with your hands limp?
I mean, you could stand with your hands limp, but what I was told, and it seems to track with my experience, is that the higher your hands are, the more energy is cultivated. So it's harder to hold your hands up higher, and it's more intense. And
yeah,
to your side, you don't really get the same sort of certain. Basically, how I experience it is, yeah, this is my model. This is just my own model of it.
Yeah.
But when you get into these positions, discomfort arises, and where there's discomfort, that's where you're holding unnecessary tension. And then over time, that tension coming up against it over and over forces you to learn to relax the parts that you typically hold tension in. And then when you relax those parts, then energy can begin to flow through those parts. And so that increases the relaxation as well as the energy flow. So if you have your arms up, then there are going to be more of those points that are uncomfortable that will allow you to relax and allow energy to flow. But if your hands are at your side, it'll be less uncomfortable, and therefore there'll be less of that benefit over time of discomfort to relaxation to energy flow.
That's fascinating. That's cool. I think I'll actually just try that. Do a whole lot of body stuff. Recently, was surprised at how different it was to walk during prayer, which, and when I say prayer, it has, I'm distinguishing that from what I call in my head internally meditation, but it's not too different.
No, I mean, I think it's, I categorize them as the same, basically. So different techniques of the same space. So I should mention as well, just real quick about the standing, that it's very important to not let any of your joints lock, but especially the knees. You want to have your knees slightly bent. It doesn't have to be extreme, but just a very slight bend in the knees rather than locking your knees. You really need to take care of the knees when you do standing practice. And ideally you warm up beforehand, actually. And I have a blog post about this, and there's some like warm-ups that are linked, but basically it's quite intense on the body, and you want to prepare the body for that kind of intensity. It's surprising how intense just standing there can be in these postures. So you want to warm up the body beforehand and take care of the knees.
That's completely true. There's something just like just indescribable like about what these states can be like. Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, part of what is so fascinating to me is like where the really, really clearly embodied stuff has or seems to take on a psychological or spiritual element. All these odd things that would be cool to get into. For example, if I try to pray to God, I often imagine God being up, and I find myself in these postures which are plaintive. It's like clear that they're plaintive in some way towards the thing which is above me. And you can see in that some type of duality, some type of opposition. Why is God not elsewhere? Why am I orienting myself up? Why am I sort of like sagging in my suffering at being what I am? You know what I mean? All of those things like then going through my mind become avenues for things to check out and go down. And it's totally just super fascinating to me when it all comes together, where you'll all think, oh, this thing that my body does, like twists in this tense way. I just think of it as body tension, which is a totally uh, physiological description. And then you see that it has like almost a social element of a personal relationship, right? That sort of makes it social, and then also spiritual and beyond that. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe I shouldn't say beyond that. I should let my terms mean things more narrowly. But yeah, social and spiritual and physical.
I would be super curious to ask if you don't mind. Like, I'm so, I've done some prayer.
Yeah,
I don't know, but not a lot, but some prayer, and the praying that I have done has been uh, very significant to me. Um, but I'm always curious to ask folks who do prayer as their main practice what it's like for them. And um, oh, I don't know. I'm just being extra blunt tonight, so sorry about that. But
hit
but
me.
most people don't really have the like phenomenological affordances to describe it in a way that actually answers the questions that I want to ask, and
Yeah,
to hear what it's actually like for them. So I would be curious to hear like a first person report for you. I mean, you already said some things, but like of what it's like for you when you pray, and I don't know. Oh, I mean, one just like uh, very gross level is like how discursive is it, like whether you're using words or not words, and then if it's not words, like what that's like for you and things
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
yeah. This is one topic where if I had, so I could fill like 200 hours of interviews on
Uh-huh.
this stuff. I just absolutely, no question, I absolutely could. Like, not even kidding.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I
but
believe it.
yeah, it's just yeah, it's so fascinating to me, and I think important as well. But I'll try to not eat up all of the time. I'll try to give you something useful. Um, I do different things. One thing I can say. I often figure out what I'm going to be doing. I start thinking about it as I'm going into it, and I let myself be just thoughtful. It's like, okay, how am I going to do this today? Often within 5 minutes of starting, it'll become something more specific, and then I go with that.
Hmm.
And sometimes I'll describe maybe two versions. Um, this I'll describe a version which is very nonverbal. The very nonverbal one of several, but a very nonverbal one is um, I experience my body as the totality of mental experience that I can identify. Um, though it often does seem specifically, centered around my body. So often there will be a bit of imagery, and it'll have that weird quality that body imagery energy does, which is like, oh, well, my upper body's like a triangle that twists down, or weird, whatever weird shape. It's that like homunculus. It's not the real shape of your body. It's the shape of your mind's sense of your body.
Hmm.
Um, and then in this one, I'll then start noticing what is not that. So I'll start noticing that those energy that energy pattern is in a space, and also that space is possibly enormous. Sometimes it feels like it's darkness, like I am in dark. I am some being of light in darkness, um, and that would make it seem like I feel holy in some way. I do feel like I am part of the divine, so I do feel like I'm part of the realm of spirits, in a way. Um, and then often at that point, some emotional content will come up, and the emotional content might be despairing. So I will notice that here's this body stuff in this space of like darkness or emptiness or unknown, and then I will find some part of me that wishes that I were greater than that, or some part of me that's trying to be beyond some confinedness, or there's some tension and some drama to that dynamic. And then I often at that point, and I do wonder if people find this interesting. Nobody's saying anything, so hopefully they find it interesting. Often at that point, um, certain like common thoughts will go through my mind, or concepts. They're not always super duper verbal, but they're known concepts. For example, um, for example, and this is an intellectual belief that I have the intellectual belief that the totality of goodness is in principle accessible to any person. I think it's already, I currently believe that it's already in our mind, and in our minds, and not accessed from the mindset we're usually in. And then, so if we go back to the scene we set, we got my body energy in the space, and then the despair and the tension and the drama of that, and then will come the idea that it is in my mind in some way, that whatever I'm reaching for is there already, and then there will start to be change in some sense, and then I just go with the grooves of that, and like and that will go wherever it goes, and it's energetic change, and it's often in the middle I'll start to like have some thought like, this is the best activity I ever do. Why am I not always doing this? And like some of that stuff will come up. Like, this is just so, like, I can't believe that I can just become oriented and I'll leave these things behind. But then that too is complex because, like, no, well, can't just be one of these people that just prays all the time. You got to like do life. That's part of what you're despairing over, is this life you're not engaging with adequately or in the ways you want to. And so, anyway, that's one of the things I'll do. I was going to describe two of them, but that's one of them. The other one I was going to describe, it has a kind of similar trajectory, but it is more verbal, and I'll do more asking and maybe talking. Sometimes I'll talk to reflect on how my life has been going and stuff like that. One other subtype, because you're curious and I like talking about this, one other subtype is where when I go into it, not believing in any of this shit. It's when I start from a place of being like, what am I even asking? I know that 2 days ago I felt like I could contact some idea of God. Right now I like don't care or don't even know what that means or don't have anything to relate to that. And starting from there, I will often just ramble about that. I just generally start by rambling about that, and that will often lead me from that point of more distance to something that's more like the sequence I described. But not always, it's never perfectly reliable. If it were perfectly reliable, I wouldn't need to do it all the time. I'd already be there, maybe.
Well, it's interesting because, yeah, I feel like you'd already be there would be more accurate. I mean, just from, I know I've read a bunch of like Peace Pilgrim, and she's like, I pray without ceasing. Because people used to ask her like to pray with her, to pray with them at a specific time. They'd like write her a letter and be like, Peace, can you pray with me at like 4 p.m. on Sunday on April 23rd or something? And she'd be like, oh, I just pray without ceasing. Like, don't worry, I'll be there. And that was it. When she started praying, it was not without ceasing, but then she learned how to pray without ceasing. And I don't know, my like concept from afar is that you move from forms of prayer that are sort of finite in time to ones that are continuous. And
so. I hadn't heard of Peace Pilgrim before. I just Googled.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've got a blog post about her too.
Cool.
It's Peace Pilgrim. Yeah, Peace Pilgrim. She was literally a pilgrim. She walked across the country about 8 times, back and forth. And she basically was. She said that she would not accept food until it was offered to her, a place to sleep until it was offered to her, and then she would keep walking until mankind knew the way of peace. So she was like a peace activist. She was also, I mean, it's hard for me to tell this sort of thing, but it seems very likely to me that she was deeply awakened, and a form of prayer was her spiritual practice. Yeah.
So it's totally fascinating because the a lot of the pilgrim or monk like types, that get recorded in history that I know of are from way further in the past. The one I frequently
she was quite recent.
Yeah, the one I frequently think about is Saint Ignatius, who founded the Jesuit order, and I think he like walked from Spain to Israel or something crazy like that, and yeah, a similar sort of set of like, yeah. What are your thoughts on like asceticism and like what's that's about, or what that's useful for, or is it useful? What is that?
Mm, well, um, I think there are a lot of ascetic practices that are, like tried and true. There's reasons that people do them. When I've done them myself, um, it feels like being like cleaned off is the metaphor that comes to mind of like you can see things falling away. And I'd say it's useful, especially for becoming attuned to that flavor of relinquishment and letting go of things, and yeah, like cleaning off of like, this is what purification feels like.
Mm,
And it can be a way of like brute forcing an attunement to that kind of aspect of experience and the spiritual path. But at least for me, well, one, it seems very possible to have that same flavor of purification through more aspects of experience than just ascetic practice. And so, um, I've seen that same flavor in other domains that aren't ascetic practice. Like for example, just sitting meditation, right?
mm,
In some ways is, you're sacrificing doing other things, but isn't like fasting or
right.
anything like that. But also, I'd say almost, what's the word? I think it's important to notice what you're called to and what you're drawn towards, and what seems fun and interesting and valuable. Ascetic practices are like, I have a tremendous respect for them. The one that I've done the most is probably pilgrimage. Actually, I've gone on 2 pilgrimages,
Hmm.
but by and large, I'm not really drawn to ascetic practices, and it's not like my jam personally. So I'm mostly attuning to what I am drawn towards and what does call me. And I think that ascetic practices are best um, engaged with if there are something that you're actually actively called to, that you're like, yes, this is what I should do. This is my
Right.
path. And Surya would always say, like, if it seems fun, that's how you know if an ascetic practice is healthy. That it's like it seems fun to fast, or it seems
Hmm.
fun to have extreme cold or heat or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Then you can trust it.
That's interesting. That's an interesting test. It's an interesting
Yeah.
test because I think mostly people, I mean, are like, that would not be fun. Like mostly people are like, no, which could come from a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean, there's an acquired taste there, and once you get a taste for it, it definitely can be fun. I've, as I say, mostly encountered that with pilgrimage. Like, I have a lot of fun when I go on pilgrimage, and I would like to do that again. But like other forms of ascetic practice aren't fun for me, even though I know I could get the same flavor there. And
Right.
so I sort of am just respecting that. But if it seems fun, it's good, and if it doesn't, no worries.
And when you say pilgrimage, what is that? What does that mean?
Well, the way that I practice it, I mean, it means a lot of different things in different traditions. I don't mean like going from A to B in a specific way from like somewhere to a holy site or something like that.
Right.
That's a tried and true form of pilgrimage. But for me, I mean, yeah, it's been mostly inspired by Peace Pilgrim, and again, Soryu, who's done this. But like, basically, you start walking and you don't have a plan for where to go to, and somehow you have to decide where to go anyway. And so
Hmm.
it's a practice for me of trusting and intuition, of like, you get to a fork in the road and you're not trying to go to a specific place. So do you go left or right? And then you somehow have to decide. And there's a practice of trusting the situation, that over and over again, you have to trust the environment that you're in. And but the 2 main variables that you have to consider are like where you're going to sleep and also how you're going to eat. And when I've done it, I have slept just basically out in the open with actually very little physical protection.
Hmm.
But I have, when I've done pilgrimage, both times I've like purchased food. Some people will beg for food on pilgrimage, but basically my experience of it is that I've done it in America both times. And if you did it in something like India or Japan or Korea, there would be a context for people knowing what you're doing and they would feed you. But Americans are extremely suspicious of strangers and not
Hmm.
hospitable in most cases. And so I haven't, even asking to like sleep on people's lawn, which I've done, like I'd say 7 out of 10 times people are very suspicious and don't want to let you stay on their lawn, especially as like a young male. Like people are like, you're creepy. So
Right. Right.
I think if you were, you know, like if I wasn't a young guy, maybe it would be different. But anyway, but I've just found it sort of expedient to purchase food and then not plan where I'm going to sleep. And yeah, there's a lot of relinquishment that can happen there, and it's been a real process of trusting my intuition and spontaneity and people and you know, like God. Basically, I feel very connected to God when I do that kind of a practice, and it's been extremely transformative for me.
It's fascinating. That's fascinating. It's fascinating to hear that description. And yeah, when I was in Asia, people would beg differently, basically. I mean, it's sort of, you know, it's just a weird thing to talk about. But I mean, there would be people hitting themselves and stuff was the thing I'd occasionally see. I found extremely odd and pretty unpleasant. Saw that in Taiwan. Not a lot of times, but it just was like, what am I interacting with here? But it often felt like it did have a sort of religious connotation. I mean, that's just a reaction. You know, it does sound like something I'd like to do. It sounds intense as hell. Sounds very intense.
Yeah, very intense. It's also shall we say legally risky. I mean, you're basically not allowed to be legally, and is my understanding, in some aspects of places. And certainly people have all kinds of rules and restrictions about what you can do where, and you know, you practically have to decide, where am I going to go to the bathroom, or you know, how am I going to spend my time? And you're basically bumping up a lot against a lot of highly contingent aspects of human society, and like not engaging with them in the way that they're designed to be engaged. So
right.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to ask a couple of the questions we got on Twitter.
Great.
So I did love this question from Holy Weather, and I do want to ask it because I'm pretty curious about it myself. So Holy Weather asked, does he have a take on the meditation sickness that some of the old East Asian stories mention? And there was a quote here that Holy threw in at my request. Before the month was out, my heart fire began to rise upward against the natural course, parching my lungs of their essential fluids. My feet and legs were always ice cold. They felt as though they were immersed in tubs of snow. There was a constant buzzing in my ears, as if I were walking beside a raging mountain torrent. I became abnormally weak and timid, shrinking and fearful in whatever I did. I felt totally drained, physically and mentally exhausted. Strange vision disappeared to me during waking and sleeping hours alike. My armpits were always wet with perspiration. My eyes watered constantly. I traveled far and wide, visiting wise Zen teachers, seeking out noted physicians, but none of the remedies they offered brought me any relief. And then the follow-up, I guess the doctor or the teacher, whoever, said, I was a sickly youth in much worse shape than you are now. I experienced 10 times the suffering you have endured. The doctors finally gave up on me. I explored hundreds of cures of my own, but none of them brought me any relief. I turned to the gods for help, prayed, etc. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. I came upon this wonderful method of soft butter contemplation. My joy knew no bounds. I immediately set about practicing it with total and single-minded determination. Before even a month was out, my troubles had almost totally vanished. Since that time, I've never been the least bit bothered by any complaint, physical or mental. So there's a lot in all of that. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, well, first off, take what I say with many grains of salt, but I'll give you my salty answer, my sense of it. If I'm not mistaken, the quote that Holy Weather shared is from Hakuin's Yasen Kana, which is, interestingly enough, idle chatter on a night boat. You and I were talking about right speech and idle speech the other night. So the name of the book is Idle Speech on a Night Boat. Which I mean, I don't know. I don't know why he picked that title. I won't claim to understand that, but I don't experience the book as idle speech. It's quite useful. It's a really good book and quite short, actually. But yeah, 𝔽𝕝𝕚 was one of many people that had this kind of a situation. There's actually two methods that are prescribed in that book. One is the dripping butter egg one that's described in the quote. The other one is one that I've done more of myself, which is basically keeping awareness low in the body from the lower abdomen to the legs and feet. And he actually has like a koan basically that's that you ask while you, but it basically have lower body awareness, body awareness in your lower body. So a few things about this. My sense is this is just what I've garnered, but is that a lot of people in traditional Zen environments were going extremely intense, where they were doing sitting meditation around the clock with energy manipulation techniques, kind of like brute forcing it, right? Mm-hmm. Probably solely in the seated posture or extensively in the seated posture. And it makes sense to me. I haven't pushed it to this limit, but it makes sense to me that if you did that unskillfully, it would cause extremely difficult physical, emotional, energetic, spiritual, psychological side effects like the ones that 𝔽𝕝𝕚 describes. I've seen people go through this sort of thing. I've started to walk down that sort of thing myself. It is not pretty. You don't want to do that. The good news is you definitely don't have to go down that direction. And there's some pretty good standard practices to avoid that. One is just, as far as I can tell, regular exercise. Regular exercise seems to be extremely important. I don't know, my meditation practice goes much better when I'm exercising regularly. So there's that. Of course, also general psychological, I'm a big fan of doing, kind of contemporary psychotherapeutic methods internal family systems and other things like that, or even metta that we were talking about. I think having a meditation diet with some of those things included is also extremely helpful. That said, I think my sense of the phenomenology of it is basically that both of the prescriptions there of the dripping energy and the lower body are about moving energy down. And I think from what I can tell, that if you move the body up the spine, up the awareness, then that's when bad things happen energetically, psychologically, spiritually, if the energy is just going up. The way I've heard it described, it's the energy already naturally tends to rise up and you don't have problems with that. And so if you continue that, it's imbalanced. And so what you actually need to do is rebalance that, is bring the awareness down into the lower body and away from up. And then, energy will still flow up, but in a more natural way. So, staying low in the body, in the lower abdomen and legs is extremely important. And I think as well, that's part of why things like standing meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong are extremely important, because those will naturally cause energy to flow good ways, including bringing it down lower into the body. And especially with the Zen practices, a lot of the real shifts come from having awareness in the lower abdomen and the lower body, and away from the head, and also away from the heart. Even metta practice is a lot about the heart, but the Zen practices are really about the wisdom that's in the lower abdomen. And so that's my sense of what's happening there. And they're pretty good, best practices to avoid having those kinds of problems. I think whatever was happening in Zen at the time, it was kind of figure it out for yourself and, just sit really hard all the time. And it makes sense that people would be running into those problems. But you want to have that kind of intensity with the dedicated contemplative practice in a balanced and sane way that includes, exercising and taking care of yourself and keeping awareness low in the body.
Yeah, Ole threw out there the melted butter thing. From what I hear, is where you imagine a pat of butter on top of your head and visualize it melting down from the top of your head all the way down until you're all made of melted butter. Is that the same thing we're talking about?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's a visualization that helps you move your awareness down and lower in the body. So
That's super fascinating.
hmm
It's just fascinating that it would be asymmetrical. To me, that sounds asymmetrical in some way. It's like, why up and not down? Or why does it go up? You know what I mean, by itself? And you know,
I mean, you do want it to go up and down. That's the sort of, what they call the microcosmic orbit.
hmm.
You know, people talk about it differently, but the central channel does go up and down. But I mean, this is one way of describing the basic human problem, is that we go into our heads and away from the wisdom that's in our lower body. And so there's sort of just a pull that way in being human, and a lot of these practices are about counteracting that. So
Is Ted Cruz enlightened? I've seen that tweet. I've seen that tweet of him with the big butter cow.
I mean, I increasingly find it useful to see all beings as awakened, and I am the ignorant. Help me in my spiritual path. So I wouldn't put it past old Ted Cruz to be enlightened in some really weird way.
It's funny. Let me glance back at our questions here. Are you laughing at the butter tweet?
Just being silly. Yeah.
We had a question. All right, well, completely different angle than anything we've talked about. Someone asked about your Date Me page and what you learned from putting it together. I don't know if you want to touch on that, but I did notice you have this Date Me page online.
I do have a Date Me page. I mean, people are doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, partly I did it because I'm also doing this like discomfort challenge of doing things that are uncomfortable, and it was uncomfortable to do it, so I did it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's been like 2 days since I posted it, so I don't know what I've learned yet. I mean,
it's only 2
days old. People have responded favorably, so that's been surprising.
Oh, you said people have responded favorably.
Yeah, like some people are like, "Oh, you seem really sweet," or "You're cute," or "You're hot," or "I like you," or whatever, and that's nice. I don't know. So basically, we'll see what happens.
It's 2 days old. Yeah. I thought it had been a little bit longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I think that would make me uncomfortable to do. I did OkCupid for a while back in the day, but I haven't really touched it. I've just been like, quarantine will end someday, and I'll figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the discomfort is like what. I mean, I have no problem being on OkCupid. I don't find OkCupid uncomfortable, but this is like connecting it to my like very public Twitter or my website, or like I find acknowledging that I'm a sexual person to be extremely uncomfortable for whatever reason, and so I'm just trying to get over that. Like it's not helping me in my life or not helping anyone, and it's more alive to acknowledge that as an aspect of my experience.
Yeah. I guess I'm personally, I do want to, no, fuck it. I'm going to ask my question. I'm personally curious. How does Buddhism, if there even is one thing, which is that, or the various traditions, how do they talk about stuff like dating and romantic partners and marriage and children and all of that? What are the answers there?
Yeah, very interesting question. One I've wrestled with personally for years at this point.
Yeah.
I'd say I think there's two different angles. One is which tradition you're talking about. Different Buddhist traditions address this quite differently. And then the other thing is there's sort of context-specific advice for whether you're a monastic or a layperson. This is, I mean, how to put this? So traditionally, monastics, you just wouldn't have sex. Different traditions over time have done this differently, but traditionally you just have sex, and then it's sort of a recent deviation that monks would be allowed to have sex or have kids or get married. There are some Buddhist traditions where that's the case, but in the Buddha's day, definitely not. and the traditional canon, they're like, no, monks shouldn't be having sex. You don't have sex. At the monastic academy, where I was training, you were allowed to have sex or be in relationships. You just couldn't have sexual misconduct, which is the layperson form of the third precept. And also, you weren't allowed to have sex with people in the community or be in relationships with people in the community. But you know, so for me, I appreciated that about training there. It felt like it was, you know, an accommodation to people in our culture. And at the same time, over time, like for myself, I saw, actually, as much as I hated to admit it, I think monastic training worked better if you are celibate, and that it would be better for me if I was training there to be celibate, and also seeing at the same time my own desire to be in relationship, to be sexually active, to be connected to people in that way, to learn and grow in that way. And so it was like, if I stay here, I think I'm being a hypocrite in that domain.
Right.
And it's not good for my own training if I'm doing monastic training. So that was just like me wrestling with it personally. I think, yeah, but lay people, basically you want to avoid sexual misconduct, you know, which takes a lot of different forms, but you can have sex, and it's different traditions deal with that differently. That are some that are more like conservative, of like, you know, basically the function is to have children, and other than that, it's a form of clinging and desire. And
right.
you know, things like Vajrayana are much more like, oh, this can be a form of spiritual growth, and you can connect it to your spiritual practice. And you know, there's a whole spectrum in between, I think, as well. So
right.
This is part of why I'm more interested in Taoism right now, of like the Taoists, for the Taoists, as far as I understand it, like it's not just like one tradition, but it's like, if you are, like sexuality and relationships are an aspect of Taoist practice. You know, I'm it's a little tricky to engage in Taoism just because there are fewer teachers than there are Buddhist teachers. And so I'm talking a little here, but from what I can tell, it's like, acknowledge that humans are sexual, and that that's like a valuable aspect of experience that you want to connect to, and that you can even use it as a basis for spiritual practice. And my sense is that's like more built in than Buddhism. So
right. Cool. Yeah, that's interesting to hear. Because again, you know, 'cause I'm interested in a lot of this this sort of spiritual. I find myself in a weird position often when it comes to spiritual path type questions, because I am not in some specific tradition, and often wish I were, but often don't know how I could possibly, like, somehow choosing feels like incorrect, and like it's not like, anyway, that's the whole thing. But I do notice that all these different traditions come back to the question of like celibacy and how to relate to it, and what does that have to do with the way to set up the mind. And so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I have nothing close to answers here. I just noticed that a lot of people in history have a lot of strong opinions.
Totally.
You know.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's actually how I currently conceive of this for myself, is like, there's sort of it's possible to walk the spiritual path, I guess, more or less. The banal way to say it would be like from first principles, but like from one's own experience or callings or questions or doubts or inclinations, and that isn't in line with a given spiritual path. So I found the training that I've done in Buddhist and to some extent Taoist context to be extremely useful, but like, I want to really properly engage with my own spiritual inklings.
Yeah.
Properly on their own terms. So
yeah, I mean, Chevron asked the question, does the impression of the benefits of celibacy for practice cover masturbation too? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally in the Pali Canon, yeah, so I mean, I've read a lot. The Buddhist tradition that I'm most familiar with is the Theravadins, who are kind of the conservatives in Buddhism. Mostly because I find the written text there quite accessible. They're also the earliest ones. But if you were a Theravadin monk, you would not masturbate, basically. And the specific variable here, and this is true in Taoism as well, is for guys at least, is semen retention. So it's considered to be like you're losing energy spiritually if you ejaculate. So yeah, that's the main variable there. And it was definitely, you wouldn't masturbate if you're a Theravada monk. That wasn't a rule that I had to follow at the monastic academy, but traditionally you wouldn't masturbate.
It's just so wild that it's like that stuff like that also appears in Christianity. Yeah, it's fascinating. Specifically, the thing about conserving energy that comes up in Doctor Strangelove. Have you seen Doctor Strangelove?
Yeah, how does it come up there?
Because the guy, the crazy guy, what is it, General Ripper or whatever, he's doing this whole thing and he's going to launch the nukes and he's going to do the whatever. And at one point, he just, while they're like under fire from people who are coming to seize the base, he like mentions offhand to the dude who's with him who's like freaking out, and he's like, what is it? I do not avoid women, but I do deny them my precious, bodily fluids or whatever. And
wow.
He's always talking about his precious bodily fluids.
Yeah. Wow.
I do deny them my essence.
Wow, that's hilarious. I did not remember that.
It's that movie's just incredible, and it's just like
incredible.
Because specifically that it comes up out of nowhere is really it's great for like characterizing the dude. Yeah, water fluoridation and stuff. I was also curious about this question. Oyster asked, what are Taoist spiritual practices like compared to Buddhist?
Well, as I say, I'm a little bit talking out of my ass here because I'm less familiar with them, and I think it's like practically harder to get acquainted. But the Tao, I mean, in general, the way I've heard about it, the Taoists are concerned with three fundamental aspects. One is the spiritual side, but they're also concerned with the health of the body and also martial applications of like spiritual technologies. So, and the way that I've actually found it most helpful to conceive of the martial side is like your ability to fully act in a situation, to like fully embody and presence yourself with, how you're showing up. Can you show up fully in a given moment?
Yeah.
That like action in the world is how I found it. Because if you just hear it as martial, it's like, I mean, I'm a pacifist, so I'm like, oh, I'm not that interested.
Right.
But if you conceive of it that way, it's actually incredibly important and fascinating to me. So the Taoists are concerned with all three of those things in a way that, I mean, I think Zen is concerned with the martial side, but not necessarily with the health side, which is why some of those problems arise that we were talking about earlier. But the Taoists are interested in all three. And then from that perspective, seated meditation is really just, it's like the final technology is my understanding. So, you want to do standing meditation, and you want Qigong, and you want to do Tai Chi, and so, other forms of expression of these practices as well. And there's the martial arts, and, there's acupuncture and various forms of body work. And all of those are aimed at one or more of these three domains. And that's a bit different than Buddhist practice, I'd say.
Yeah, I had this book on hand. Let me see if I can see how I'm pushing. There it is. The Zen Way to the Martial Arts. This is a book that I had a formative period for me was being in like junior high and high school and just buying every martial arts book I could find, and they were of very variable quality. But this is one of them. I really got a lot out of it, and this guy Tasshin who he wrote it in the 60s. I just have no idea if the guy's legit. I have no idea, but I got a lot of value from it. Vogelfrey also read it, and it is a lot.
I listened to a bunch of chanting from him, and he has an incredible voice for that's where I love his chanting. So
that's awesome. It's a lot of live each day as though a fire were raging in your hair, like that, like presence and immediacy. A lot of the no thought, no mind stuff applied to martial arts, basically. But notably in that book, this was one of my first introductions to meditation, because there's really detailed instructions, and it's sitting stuff, and it's down to the like have your thumbs be like this. And it was interesting because at that age I tried it. I had one wild experience, which was very strange as an experience, and then never was able to reproduce it, and sort of kind of moved on. But it was notable how rigidly it's like be in the posture, you know.
That's fascinating. Huh. Yeah.
Chevron to join the Discord. We should be. Does this work? Yeah, the About section. There should be a Discord link. If you're trying to call in, we may be able to do a call in if you like. Let me get you at least one more of these questions from Twitter, so I can feel good about having hit a few of them.
Cool.
All right, we've got two that you can pick from. One of them is, what most surprised you about the history of monasteries, and what question does he think has not been adequately addressed? I'm not exactly sure how to interpret, but maybe you do. The other one is, what's the most important lesson he's learned from doing his series of uncomfortable things, and what about his comfortable things?
Yeah, I think I'll go with the I don't think I have a good answer to the history of monasteries one, so I'll go with the other one.
Sure.
Yeah, that's mostly like a long-running intellectual investigation that I don't have good answers to, which is why I talk about it. I don't have good answers. So, discomfort. I don't know. I'm only like a third of the way into this challenge that I've given myself to do 30 uncomfortable things. So not done yet as well, but I mean, I already had the sense going in, but there's just a way in which when you identify the things that are uncomfortable for you and then do them, then it forces you up against emotional blocks that you maybe knew you had, or maybe didn't know you have, or both. And then once you've gotten through those, then amazing things start to happen. So there are some specific blocks that are like themes that you can already see in the ones that I'm choosing. You know, that I was talking about earlier, sexuality and romantic involvement and stuff like that, where like I was just like limiting myself in all the absurd ways, and it's really freeing to not give in to those limits anymore, and my life feels like more alive and free, and like I'm connected to different people in new ways. And I notice myself sort of like leaning into discomfort frequently, where like I'll just be like, yeah, I'll do this thing that is possible in this moment, even though it's uncomfortable. And there's sort of a flavor of like I get excited when there's a possibility of something that's uncomfortable, because I know that it will be interesting and valuable at the other side of it. It's possible I'm like overdoing it a little bit. I'm not sure. Today, the most recent thing was like someone on Twitter recently had this, like they took down this tweet, but they're like, life pro tip: ask your friends for their sex tapes. So I was like, well, that would be really uncomfortable for me to do. So okay, done. So I was talking to these friends of mine that are pretty sex positive and I have a good relationship with, and I was talking to both of them. They're a couple, and I was like, okay, fuck it, here we go. And they were totally not offended. I think that's the most surprising thing, is I keep expecting people to be like offended or freaked out by certain things, and no one's offended. People just don't care, or like are amused, and it's not the end of the world. It's like I'm the only one that cared as much as I did about the thing that I was freaking out about. So it's freeing. It's freeing. Yeah.
So I haven't been doing that specific practice, but the other day I mean, I did have the thought I want to do something because it's uncomfortable, and this was I posted this video. It was kind of a joke where I had some thought about like we could improve history education by having Dungeons and Dragons that's like transparent metaphors for actual historical events, and then kids would get into the D&D, play the game, and then they'd have. Turns out you just learned the Roman Civil War or whatever. But I posted
Yeah,
it.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, it is a great idea. I posted it. I happen to be eating food all the time, and I posted it while I'm eating this food. I'm eating this chicken, and I'm like ripping the chicken, and I've got this bone sticking on my mouth. I'm like chewing it, and I'm like ripping it out, and I'm like got some like shit in my mustache, and I'm like pick up some radishes. And I'm like eating it, and like eating rice and stuff, and it's like all with my hands. And I did this in part because my thought process was, in general, I'm doing the social media thing. I want to expand my comfort while keeping it reasonable, not make myself look like a total like weirdo, right? But I thought someone was gonna call me out. Like someone was gonna be like, bro, like why are you stuffing your face while you do this? And nobody did. Nobody did. I've got 2,000 followers and nobody did. Lithros, thank you for coming by. Good to see you, dude. And
nice talking to you, Lithros. Take care.
And it was just this thing. It was just nobody did. And then I tweeted about that and asked, and a couple of people were like, "Yeah, I found it gross, but like that was that." They were just like, "I didn't really like the sound of you chewing," which to me is like, okay, that's reasonable. You don't need to like the sound of me chewing. I was expecting a little more vicious or something, a little more judgmental, but maybe it's all silent. But anyway, it just kind of hot.
I think I started watching that, and like the reaction that I had was like a little bit of. I don't know what the word is, but there's like a certain flavor that I experience from you that's like, I don't know what the word for it is, but just like, I guess absurd is the closest word to it, where like you're just like pushing the boundaries, and it's like hard to like settle into a conceptual frame for what's happening or what you're doing. Like trying to explain the conceit of the show to like my parents. It's like I don't even know how to explain what you're doing in a way that makes any sense, but like and it's like it makes sense, but when you put it into words. So anyway, it was just like an absurd thing to me. That's the closest word. It's not quite right, but it was like amusing and like enjoyable even from that perspective.
I'm pleased with that reaction. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Well, we are getting towards our time, so I just want to, I don't know if anyone in the audience has been sitting on any questions. Now's a great time to fire them out there. And if you've got anything on your mind, Tasshin, that would be good to touch on. In general, I've enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I want to chat with you more often. That's one thing I want to do. And I want to read a couple of your blog posts is one of the things, and I want to try meta in a different way, given some of the thoughts from tonight. So that's just kind of some of what I'm taking away.
I love it.
So yeah, I don't know. Is there anything that is on your mind, or any topic we didn't cover?
Yeah, I think my intention was just like mostly to make myself available to see what arose when we put ourselves in this configuration of the universe. There's no like agenda on my end. I'm happy you've enjoyed it and want to talk more. I feel like there's that meme that's been going around and I just thought of just now of like the dude that has like the swords pointed to him everywhere. It's like, have you seen that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I think I got myself into a little bit of that situation, but
yeah, that was unexpected.
Unexpected, but seems like I'm not dead yet. So maybe I'll get canceled after this for caring about plants.
No, I think we rolled with it pretty well. Shivern asked about links to any of Tasshin's posts about trying to start out with meta. If you want to drop one in there right now, if that's easy, you could. But also, I'll get Tasshin to put some of this in the philosophy channel in my Discord, which there's a link.
I'll put. I like alluded to like 8 different blog posts that I've written, so I'll drop those all in there afterwards. Yeah.
All right, sweet. I want to try to land right now because I'm over it, but I'm gonna take another pass because I came in too fast, I think, for landing this plane. Yeah, the standing meditation is interesting. The idea of the kind of higher energy state from having your hands up is not something
Hmm.
I had tried. Um,
Yeah, I will say, for me at least, the benefits really come, uh, like, uh, from consistent daily practice. And so, um, if you just do it once, it's like, oh, this is boring and or uncomfortable.
mhm.
But if you do it consistently for 5 to 20 minutes every day for like 30 to 90 days, which is a bit of an ask, but like
Right.
incredible things happen in the energy body if you bring that kind of consistency to it. So,
One thing I'd be curious about is because I do a lot of body stuff. I wonder how different of a thing, because one thing to control for is doing body stuff at all versus not,
yeah,
and
sure.
then how to know how different the practice is, basically.
Yeah, you might see some of those positive effects sooner. I wouldn't be surprised about that if given the extensive body practices that you've
Okay.
done. Um, but in any case, like it is really the kind of thing that if you take to it, it's like good to do every day. So,
Yeah. All right, we're gonna try to land this plane. Oh,
oh yeah.
there we go. Slow down. It's going a little too fast. Put the brakes on. All right. Ooh. Uh-oh. All right, we're gonna hit the forest. This happens. All right, we're going to the forest. There we go. we're just gonna we're just gonna slide to a complete stop.
Hey, it's appropriate. We're caring about the trees here.
Yeah.
Slash running them over, but it's all
Well,
right.
in this situation, it seems that we're just flying right
We're
right
just
through them.
flying right through them inexplicably.
Oh no.
All right,
All
we
right,
did it.
well, now it started rolling down the hill. Well,
First person view. Oh, that's great. That's great.
come on,
Oh
plane.
man.
I want it to come to a complete stop. There we go. There we go. There we go. Oh my god. All right. Well, this is going to have to do. Um, Tasshin, it has been great having you on the show. Why don't we wrap this here and then, later I will get this on YouTube. If there's any particular part you're interested in me clipping out as like, Tasshin on on one of the topics we hit, we can also separate that out and it's kind of cool. Um,
Hmm.
audience, what should, is the audience the crew or the passengers? I guess you guys are the passengers. Whatever. Enough of that. Always great to have you guys. Yeah, thanks for coming by, Chevron. Everyone who's listening who doesn't happen to be in chat, we're glad you're here as well. Vogel Free, I guess Lithos already headed out. Oyster, 𝔽𝕝𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕦𝕝𝕚𝕚, Soren, and many more.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kersey, and thanks everybody. Enjoyed talking to everyone.